Chapter 5233. Z7, who was guarding the entrance, stared straight ahead. When he saw who it was with his night vision binoculars, he bit down hard on his cheeks. His face was as cold as ice as he said, F***CK. It's not anti-government militants. It's part of the government army that betrayed us. They communicated in English. Major David, who was driving away, felt his heart sink. He pressed on the hidden earpiece and said, "Comrades, retreat quickly. Don't get involved in the battle between the two armies. Damn it, part of the government army betrayed us. There must be something wrong with the Liabi government." Reporter Chun, who was struggling in the car, got the latest news from the front line immediately. However, she couldn't get out of the car and send the latest news back to Base C. No, she had to get out of the car. Panting heavily, she no longer shouted at the top of her lungs. She did not have the strength to shout anymore. Her throat was so hoarse that it hurt, as if there was a fire burning it. Her voice was already hoarse, and if she continued shouting, she was afraid that she would lose her voice. She didn't struggle anymore. She needed to find a chance to get out of the car. Chinese soldiers going in and out of the nightclub and government army betraying us were all top news. She had to find a way to spread the news. And her camera. My camera. Where's my camera? Where did my camera go? Stop the car. I lost my camera. I want my camera back. Without a camera, it was useless even if she knew the top news. Reporting needed to be true, and the truth was often conveyed through photos and snippets. She didn't even have a camera. Even if she knew the top news, it was useless. Without evidence, no one would believe her. As a journalist, she knew the importance of evidence and photos. Reporter Chun, who was slapping the bulletproof armored vehicle with both hands, was so angry that she was like a crazy lioness. When her hands hurt, she used her feet to kick the bulletproof armored vehicle. "I want to get off. Stop the car. Stop the car. You have no right to restrict my personal freedom. You're breaking the law." It was impossible for the car to stop. Major David even urged the soldiers to speed up. He contacted the soldiers in the middle car and told them to speed up and enter the safe zone. Other than Reporter Chun, who was from Base C, the other 5 were in the middle car. The front car was the breakout car. If there was an accident, it would immediately cover the middle car's safety. The back car was responsible for everyone's safe retreat. Major David was in the car behind them, accompanied by the reporters who gave him a headache. The commotion did not affect his decision-making. As a peacekeeper, he had no right to join the fight between the two armies. He had to leave as soon as possible. As for the guys from the Chinese side, may God bless them to return safely. As soon as the first car turned into an entrance, a huge explosion rang out in front of them. Flames soared into the sky, and rocks and scrap iron were sent flying everywhere. Countless pieces of debris splashed out like rain along with the flames, adding another scar to this war-torn city. Major David, who was still praying for the Chinese soldiers, heard the explosion and saw the raging fire engulfing the surroundings through the windshield. Inside the car, Reporter Chun, who was struggling frantically, screamed in fright, "Quick, quick, get out of the car, get out of the car." She screamed and grabbed Major David's arm tightly. Her eyes were filled with fire, clearly reflecting her fear. Chapter 5234. There was a bomb in front of them, and it blew up the vehicles in front of them. There were rebels in front of them. As a reporter, she had to be quick to react. She had to be sensitive to the news, to the development of facts, to the value of the news, and to the ability to escape in the face of danger. Reporter Chun was very good in this area. She was a well-known reporter in Bay City, and she did have some news. Coupled with her ability to create momentum, she became one of the most famous reporters in Bay City. The explosion frightened Reporter Chun, and she immediately realized that there must be rebels in front of them. They would only die like the vehicles in front of them. Major David's patience with her completely disappeared at this moment, but he resisted the urge to push her away. He was a soldier, and he couldn't do anything stupid. Major David's face was illuminated by 2 blazing flames. He was a handsome and gentlemanly British soldier. He had both the fierceness of a soldier and the elegance of a gentleman. The combination of the 2 qualities made him very charming. However, Major David was no longer as elegant as he used to be. He raised his hand and pressed the hidden headset in his ear. His deep light brown eyes burst with panic, and he shouted, "Alan, are you okay? Are you okay? Retreat! Retreat! There's an ambush! There's an ambush! Retreat!" The voice of the soldier in front of them came from the headset. The wheels rolled over the bumpy street, and they retreated at the fastest speed. The armored vehicle in front of them looked clumsy, but at this time, it turned around the corner quickly and nimbly. God, they almost died just now. Major David heard the voice of his comrade in front of him, and his heart that was about to jump out of his chest fell back to its original place. His heart was beating fast. He took a deep breath and sniffed the smoke in the car. He quickly adjusted his panic state of mind and said, "Change the retreat route." If they didn't change the retreat route, the three cars would meet God. Major David didn't want to meet God early. He still wanted to return to his country alive. No one didn't want to return to their country alive. Xia Jinyuan and the others also heard the voices of the British soldiers. They were in trouble, but they did not expect Major David to be in trouble as well. Case 7, who had already rushed out, placed his hands on the edge of the window and leaped down from the second floor like a crane. He was the last to leave the nightclub. The little boy, who was being protected by his parents, hugged his father tightly and said softly, "Dad, when are we going home?" "Soon, baby. Once we leave here, we can go home." The father kissed his young son. Beside him was his wife. Feeling his wife trembling in fear, he leaned over and kissed his wife's hair. "Don't be afraid. We will definitely return home safely. Don't be afraid." With the Chinese soldiers, they would definitely return home safely. Endless gunshots rang out. Bang, bang, bang. It was as if one could still hear the bullets whizzing out, bringing with them the sharp sound of death. The wife, who had carried her son to the war-torn country in a fit of anger, blamed herself deeply. It was all her fault. If it weren't for her willfulness, their family of 3 wouldn't have been in danger. It was all her fault. It was all her fault. Chapter 52:35. The gunshots that could take lives at any moment showed no signs of stopping. The wife hugged her husband's arm and lowered her head. She bit her lower lip and let out a suppressed cry. "Mom, don't be afraid. The uncles will help us get home. We'll see Grandpa and Grandma soon." The little boy heard his mother's sobs. He thought that his mother was afraid and comforted her like a little adult. The couple's tears flowed freely. Case 7 had already come down. Everyone could retreat. Go, go. G3, who was guarding the retreat, said in a low voice. They started to gather in one direction from a scattered inverted triangle, including Z7, who was guarding the entrance. Xia Jinyuan, by T6, V8, K7, and the family of 3 that they rescued made a total of 8 people. After G3 and Z7 met up, they quickly approached Xia Jinyuan. The father hugged his son tightly and kept kissing the child's forehead. He comforted him in a low voice. "Don't be afraid, baby. Don't make a sound. Mom and Dad will protect you. Don't be afraid." He used to be a Chinese. Before he emigrated, he didn't encounter the war at all. He even felt that the war was too far away from him. After he left the country, he joined Liabi because of his family's business. He started the most profitable, but also the most dangerous war business. He provided alcohol for the nightclubs in Liabi. Wealth comes from danger. He didn't expect that he would almost lose his wife and child's lives. Hearing the gunshots, the mother who retreated was frightened. She clutched her husband's clothes tightly and touched the child's little hand and face from time to time. She never thought that she would carry the child into Liabi in a fit of anger and almost lose her life. Xia Jinyuan didn't understand the twists and turns between the husband and wife. The most important thing now was to leave. They obviously couldn't leave easily. They were surrounded. He and G3 took turns moving forward. From the dark streets, under the cover of the ruins, they moved away from the nightclub that had become the center of the crossfire. "Let's find a place to catch our breath first, then think of a way to get out." Xia Jinyuan, whose back was pressed against the wall, turned around and glanced at the man who was shielding his wife and children under his arm. The most important thing was to send the 3 of them out. Outside, the traitorous government forces were already exchanging fire. Those who were lucky enough to escape from the nightclub did not manage to escape the bullets of the traitorous government forces. Bullets flew over, and screams rang out continuously. They passed through the chaotic crowd, crawling, squatting, running, and finally made it out of the nightclub alive. However, they did not expect that what awaited them outside was still death. There was nowhere to run and nowhere to hide. The traitorous government forces had obviously made preparations in advance to catch the government off guard. They surged out from several places in the city and started a large-scale war. The location of the nightclub was just a signal for them to start a war. The sky above the city was ablaze, and the peacekeeping forces of various countries entered the first level of alert. The Chinese and British peacekeeping forces were still anxiously waiting for their comrades who went out to rescue the reporters to return. Major David and the others had already abandoned the vehicle. They no longer considered escaping in the vehicle. The large vehicle would become the main target of the rebel army. They destroyed the oil circuit of the vehicle and blew up the vehicle's control system. The expensive armored vehicle became scrap metal that could no longer be driven. This was to prevent it from falling into the hands of the rebel army. They were not far away from Xia Jinyuan, but it would be difficult for them to meet up. Xia Jinyuan brought his family of 3, and Major David brought 6 reporters. Among them, there was a reporter who was extremely uncooperative throughout the entire process. She was also the only woman present. Chapter 5236. Major David pulled out his gun and pointed the muzzle at Reporter Chen's forehead. "Madam, you're making me very angry right now. It's easy for 1 or 2 reporters to die on the battlefield. Are you afraid? Are you afraid now?" Of course, she was afraid. This was the first time Reporter Chen had a gun pointed at her head. She was even more afraid than when she was locked up in a room. After all, he had seen the world. Calming his mind, Reporter Chen's lips trembled as he pretended to be calm. "Please remember your identity. Don't stain the blue helmet with blood. Don't insult the word peacekeeping." "Yes, reporter, you're right. I have to remember my identity at all times. Otherwise, do you think you'll still be alive?" Major David sheathed his gun. He had lost all his patience with this woman. They had restocked their equipment in the car. They had grenades, rifles, and bullets. With these, they felt more confident. The Chinese men were in a bit of trouble. They didn't have any equipment. The 2 Chinese soldiers who retreated with them only asked for night vision binoculars and nothing else. Major David put away his gun and contacted Xia Jinyuan. "Buddy, we need to gather and work together to evacuate. There are too many rebels." The cold muzzle moved away from her forehead. Reporter Chen's pale face finally regained some color. She gasped for air, and her anger reached its peak. She was a reporter responsible for real-time reporting on the situation in Liabi. She came to Liabi to represent the Base C. However, someone pointed a gun at her head and threatened to kill her if she didn't shut up. This was an insult to her and also a disrespect to the Base C community. She would definitely report everything that had just happened. She would punish the person who pointed a gun at her head. She would do it. Xia Jinyuan could hear Major David's angry voice. He didn't answer immediately. They crouched behind cover and listened to the sound of footsteps nearby. Everyone held their breath, including the sensible little boy. He didn't know what had happened, but he knew that all the sounds he heard were gunshots. The people running outside were probably bad guys. He hugged his father's neck tightly, and his little face was buried in his father's shoulder, which made him feel safe. His eyes were wide open, revealing a fear that shouldn't belong to someone his age. Their footsteps were messy, and they quickly passed by the ruins. Xia Jinyuan, who was hiding in a building that had been destroyed by artillery fire, glanced around coldly and answered Major David. "Let's meet up first and try to avoid the area where the 2 armies are fighting." This was exactly what Major David wanted. He didn't want to get involved in the crossfire between the government army and the rebel government army. Major David heaved a sigh of relief when he learned that the Chinese soldiers had the same thoughts as him. Why was he relieved? While retreating, they were still able to rescue a family of 3 and bring them to his side. He was really worried that the Chinese soldiers would have the heart of a saint, and in the end, they would all lose their lives. Now that his worries were gone, Major David felt that they would have a pleasant cooperation with the Chinese soldiers. Of course, it would be pleasant to work with a group of tough men. Very good, man. Now we're here to look for you. Before we arrive, you need to hide well. Also, keep a close eye on the child. Don't let him make a sound. Chapter 52:37. Children were ticking time bombs. They would scream out of fear. When that happened, they would be in big trouble. Major David, who had kindly reminded him, joked, "You need to keep an eye on a small problem, but I have a big problem here that gives me a bigger headache." Big problem? Reporter Chun was right beside him. She heard everything clearly. Her eyes flashed with anger as she glared fiercely at the guy who despised her. He had already prepared a draft of the article and only needed a little polishing to turn it into words. Xia Jinyuan knew who the big problem was. He really didn't know what the Gulf Coast reporter had done to make Major David despise her so much. He even lost the gentlemanly demeanor that he had always maintained. The sound of gunfire was endless outside. The entire sky above the city was filled with the sound of artillery fire. Overnight, the city was engulfed by artillery fire. Who knew how many innocent Libyan people had lost their lives? As for their homes had long been lost. They were riddled with holes and could not return to their former peace. The country of Libya had never been at peace. The sound of explosions continued to ring in the sky above the city. The entire city had lost its order. The devastated Libyan people rushed out of their temporary shelters in the middle of the night. The children who had lost their parents cried in fear. The adults who were running ran into them and passed by them. No one stopped because of the children's cries. Everyone was running for their lives. They all fled to the camps of the peacekeeping forces of various countries. That would be their shelter. As long as they entered the camps of the peacekeeping forces, the government forces would not mistakenly hit them, and the anti-government militants would not randomly rush in. Only by entering the camps of the peacekeeping forces would they have a chance to survive. Have you contacted them? Have you contacted them? In the command center of the Chinese peacekeeping forces, a person in charge shouted. The 7 peacekeepers they had sent to rescue the 3 missing Gulf Coast reporters had yet to return. They had lost contact with them half an hour ago. When they learned that the rebel forces had exchanged fire at the nightclub where the rescuers were being rescued, the person in charge broke out in cold sweat. At the first exchange of fire, they had lost contact. The person in charge was very worried about whether they were in danger or had met with mishap. The station replied to the person in charge that they had not received any news. The British peacekeeping forces had not received any news either. The soldiers sent by both sides had all lost contact. A large number of refugees are rushing to the peacekeeping camp. Please support. Please support. Let them go, let them go. According to the latest report, the highest military officer in Liabai has rebelled. The rebels are trying to take control of the Liabai government. In China, Yi Qian was sitting in front of the television, watching the latest news report on Liabai. Reporter Chun from Wanhai did not release the report immediately. Our war correspondent had already sent the latest report back to China, as well as the current situation in Liabai. Yi Qian narrowed her eyes and stared intently at the television. She had experienced such a situation before. She had weaved in and out of gunfire and received the baptism of war. In the end, she had come back alive, covered in blood. It was already early in the morning in China. Yi Qian, who had just returned from training, turned on the TV and glanced at it. The real-time report did not last long. After it ended, Yi Qian turned off the television and walked around the base alone. She only returned to the dormitory when she felt a little cold from the cold wind. From her line of sight, she could see the figures of the Chinese peacekeepers. She also saw a large number of refugees pouring into the camp. She saw the Chinese peacekeepers maintaining order and organizing the refugees to take refuge in the camp. Chapter 52:38. Due to the 8-hour time difference between the two countries, it was already 5 o'clock in the morning when people in China saw the latest news from Liabai. Those who paid attention to military news could see the latest news from Xinhua News Agency when they turned on the TV. The camera swept across the faces of the refugees who had entered the camp. The joy on their faces was in stark contrast to the horror on the faces of the refugees who had yet to enter the camp. The video was a little blurry, but due to the crossfire less than 10 kilometers away from the peacekeeping camp, the camera could still see flames burning the city. The sound of gunfire, the sound of artillery fire, the running figures, and the crying people of Liabi. The country in the video was in deep trouble. Even through the TV screen, one could feel the destructive despair of life. Those who were more emotional were already wiping tears away with red eyes, while those who were more rational shook their heads and let out a long sigh. The mountains and rivers were shattered, the country was destroyed, and the people were dead. Due to the direct focus of the camera, very few people would notice that there was a line of small words flipping at the bottom of the screen. Yi Jian didn't notice it first, and only noticed it when she accidentally glanced at it the second time. The subtitles appeared. According to the latest news, the 3 missing Gulf Coast reporters have been successfully rescued by our country's peacekeeping soldiers. Due to the betrayal of the Liabi officials, the rescuing peacekeepers and the 3 rescued Gulf Coast reporters have temporarily lost contact. Yi Qian's heart suddenly tightened when she saw the short line of words. She was a soldier who had been in a war-torn country and knew what losing contact meant. The war prevented the rescue soldiers from returning to the camp and also cut off the peacekeepers' contact with the camp. It was 5 o'clock in the morning in China, and 9 o'clock in the evening in Liabi was the most intense time of the war. Yi Qian, who had just finished her night parachute jump, was no longer sleepy. She was worried about the missing peacekeepers. Her heart rate was a little abnormal. She was panicking and in a mess. There was also a sense of suffocation that made even her breathing become particularly rapid. This feeling was very, very bad. It had happened again after a few years. The first time it happened, Grandpa Jin passed away. The second time it happened, Uncle Chen was born. The third time it happened, Captain Xia was in danger. The fourth time, this was the 4th time. Moreover, after seeing the inconspicuous subtitles, a sense of suffocation suddenly hit her. Captain Xia, Captain Xia. Yi Qian's heart was beating wildly as she silently muttered her lover's name. She secretly clenched her fists, and a cold light appeared in her bright black eyes. The missing peacekeepers were most likely Captain Xia, and the rest of them were the special forces of the Snowfield Brigade. Hostage rescue was a life and death mission for the Snowfield Brigade. The identity of the Gulf Coast reporter was special. Since the country had agreed to send troops, they would definitely not send ordinary peacekeepers to rescue them. They would only send special forces with high success rates. The special forces of the Shui Brigade would be the first choice. Back in the dormitory, the assistant class monitor noticed that Yi Jian didn't look well. He thought that Yi Jian's body had a strange reaction after parachuting, so he quickly asked, "Are you not feeling well? You don't look good." Hearing this, Yi Qian raised his hand and touched his face. "Do I look bad? Thank you for your concern, Deputy Squad Leader. I just saw the news in Liabi and saw that our peacekeepers had temporarily lost contact. I was a little worried." Afraid that the Deputy Squad Leader would think too much, Yi Qian answered truthfully, "The first governor has rebelled, and the entire city is in a state of war. I'm a little worried that the missing peacekeepers might be in danger." Although it was another country, the female soldiers in the dormitory felt a lot more worried because it was related to their country's peacekeepers. Chapter 52-39. The Vice Squad Leader gently patted Yi Qian's shoulder. She could tell that Yi Qian was really worried about the missing peacekeepers. It's fine. The soldiers selected for peacekeeping are all soldiers with strong comprehensive abilities. After they are selected for peacekeeping, they will undergo several months of targeted training. Trust me, they will be fine and will return safely. Peacekeeping was not an easy task. It was like going from a peaceful country to a war-torn country that was constantly under attack by bullets and artillery. Before they went, all the peacekeepers were prepared to sacrifice themselves at any time. Some of the soldiers even left a suicide note in advance for the troops. If they returned safely, the suicide note would be destroyed. If they did not return, the suicide note would be given to their families. 4 high-risk Special Forces soldiers like Xia Jinyuan, who knew how many suicide notes they wrote every year. The content was different every time. This time, they also wrote suicide notes when they went to Liabi. Yi Qian knew that the squad leader was comforting him. He smiled slightly. Yes, they will all return safely. Their families and comrades are waiting for them to come back. The smart Lu Hui could tell that something was different. She tilted her head and put down the military boots in her hands. She asked Yi Qian cautiously, "Are there any of your old comrades in the troops that will be sent out?" She was quite sharp. The vice squad leader, who did not think in this direction, froze for a moment. She saw that Yi Qian's expression suddenly became a bit more serious. The vice squad leader's heart sank. Lu Hui couldn't have been right? After Lu Hui finished speaking, she kept staring at Yi Qian. She naturally saw the serious expression on Yi Qian's face. She scolded herself in her heart. She squatted down to scrub her shoes and threw away the brush and boots. She stood up with a whoosh and hugged Yi Qian. It's fine. The soldiers that can go on peacekeeping are all good soldiers in the company. Losing contact is nothing. They will definitely return safely. Don't think too much. Ever since she learned how powerful Yi Qian was, Lu Hui had become Yi Qian's #1 follower in the female squad. Sometimes, the squad leader could not help but scold her for being a dog. Lu Hui was not angry and still looked proud of it. Now that he saw that he was right, he panicked even more. Pull yourself together, Captain Yi. You're an unbeatable person. Our psychological quality has to pass. We can't be depressed because of uncertain things. People are thinner than yellow flowers. Yi Qian's heart was a bit heavy. After she cheered him up, the heavy feeling in his heart calmed down a lot. He hugged Lu Hui, who was comforting him, and smiled. It's fine, I can handle it. He continued, You're a good scout. You're so sharp, yet you saw through me. Actually, I'm just guessing whether there are any comrades from my old unit. I guess there are. Maybe not. Don't think too much. Lu Hui, who was breathing softly, put her chin on Yi Qian's shoulder and hung on Yi Qian like a sloth. Did you eat the ginseng and Ganoderma from Changbai Mountain? Why are you so energetic? We are so tired after an all-nighter that we can't even open our eyes, but you can still watch TV. Last night, they gathered at 7 o'clock and jumped into the mountains and rivers. The terrain was steep, and there was a turbulent river. Everyone was nervous when they were descending. Even Captain Lei reminded all the paratroopers to pay attention to safety from time to time. The gap between the two parachutes must be wide. It could be seen that Captain Lei was sweating. Only their Captain Yi, Bold Yi, was fine. She was the only one who could still watch TV after coming back. She also happened to see her old comrades go missing in the war zone. This matter really made people feel bad. Chapter 5240. Yi Qian regretted that she didn't control her emotions and made them worry. Sometimes, it was hard for her to control her emotions when she met Captain Xia. She rubbed her face, looked up, and smiled brightly at the female soldiers. It's okay. I'll be fine after a while. Rest early. We'll gather in an hour and a half for the exercise. Because of the overnight parachute jump, the original 5:30 p.m. exercise time was delayed to 6:30 p.m., giving the soldiers an hour and a half to rest and adjust. They were to gather at 6:30 p.m., sharp without asking for leave. Now, the female soldiers who followed the male soldiers closely were no longer as relaxed as they were 6 months ago. After joining the Special Reconnaissance Team, they changed from ordinary paratroopers to special paratroopers, and the difficulty of their training directly increased. All the daytime training would not be delayed because of the overnight parachute jump. According to the rules, delaying the assembly by an hour and a half was already a big concession from Captain Lei. Yi Qian didn't want to affect everyone's rest because of her, so he urged everyone to go to bed. Sleep. We'll gather in an hour and a half. In the future, she had to learn to control her emotions. Now, the female soldiers, including the squad leader and deputy squad leader, were all centered around her. Her words and actions would directly affect the female soldiers' words and actions, so she had to be careful. Today, she lost control of her emotions, and this was the only time. While speaking, Yi Jian, who had already restrained her emotions, sent the female soldiers to the upper bunk. She then climbed onto the upper bunk and lay down. Fang Xing, who was sleeping on the lower bunk, suddenly whispered, "Captain Yi, have you ever thought of peacekeeping?" Since Yi Qian mentioned peacekeeping soldiers, Fang Xing didn't feel sleepy anymore. She lay on the bed and rolled over twice in a row. She mustered up the courage to ask Yi Qian. Fang Xing was a very introverted and shy female soldier. She had the stubbornness of a Sichuan person deep in her bones. She was low-key and steady in everything she did. Captain Lei liked her personality very much. Yi Qian also liked it very much. Hearing her whisper, Yi Qian leaned half of his body out from the top bunk and looked down at Fang Xing, who was awake. "What's wrong? Do you have any thoughts about peacekeeping?" "Yes, I want to go. But our unit shouldn't be able to go. The peacekeeping soldiers sent out are mainly from the army." Fang Xing spoke softly. She did not want everyone to know. "When I was still in the old army, I thought about it, but I knew that the chances were very small. It was so small that it was almost zero. The probability of sending airborne troops to peacekeeping was indeed very small, so small that it was negligible. Peacekeeping missions are even more dangerous than what we see on TV. There are all kinds of variables, and we don't know when we'll be out. The peacekeepers have their heads tied to their waistbands every day outside, and they could fall off at any time. Peacekeeping isn't as simple as you think. It's also more dangerous than you think. Even if you're outside the peacekeeping camp, you can still be bombarded at any time." Yi Qian spoke softly for Fang Xing to hear, as well as for the female soldiers who were still awake. Peacekeeping is a bridge of peace built with blood and bones. Blood and bones are forged, and spirit is the carrier. As long as the war continues, the bridge will never be destroyed. This was the spirit, as well as the great love that was forged with life. Memories of the past flashed through his mind. Yi Qian closed his eyes to hide the surging undercurrent in them. "Her Captain Xia, please come back safely. Please remember our promise. You go away, I'll wait." Fang Xing didn't speak for a long time. After a while, her lips moved and closed. She didn't ask any more questions and closed her eyes as if she had fallen asleep. Chapter 52:41. Actually, she really wanted to ask Yi Qian, who had a deep understanding of peacekeeping is not easy, if she had participated in peacekeeping before. She wanted to ask, but she didn't dare to, so it was better to bury it in her heart. Captain Yi had a lot of secrets, and everyone knew about it, so she didn't ask. The female soldiers didn't say anything else. They blinked, closed their eyes, turned over, and fell asleep after a while. Yi Jian raised her hand and gently placed it on her chest. Her heart was thumping as if it was filled with lead, causing her to feel very uncomfortable. Every time she breathed in and out, the place where her heart was beating pulled at her flesh and blood, causing her to feel pain. Her eyes were already red. She placed one hand on her chest and the other hand on her forehead, covering her eyes and hiding the panic on her face. It's okay. Don't panic. Who is Captain Xia? He definitely won't let anything happen to me." Yi Qian kept comforting herself in her heart with her eyes closed. As long as she thought that the missing peacekeepers might be comrades of Captain Xia and the Snowfield Brigade, she couldn't fall asleep at all. The rebels were trying to take over the entire city. Would the Chinese peacekeepers be in danger? The rebels and anti-government militants didn't want peacekeepers to appear in the countries they wanted to take over because it would make them hesitate. From the battle tonight, the rebels' firepower was extremely fierce. Moreover, it was the top military officer in Liabia who started the rebellion. It was possible that they would fire at the peacekeepers of other countries. This kind of thing was hard to say. If a shell was mistakenly fired and a few scapegoats were pushed out to accept international condemnation, the matter would be left unsettled in the end. In war, it was normal to accidentally fire. In war, it was also normal for few peacekeepers to die. Yi Qian didn't fall asleep until the delayed whistle sounded. When the whistle sounded, she was the first to sit up and wash up as quickly as possible. The only way to stop herself from thinking too much was to devote herself to training and do what was right in front of her. It was 6:30 in the morning in China, and 10:30 in the evening in Liabia. Xia Jinyuan and Major David had completed the rendezvous. It was only a distance of 3 kilometers, but they took a total of 3.5 hours to successfully meet up. It was obvious how dangerous it was outside. You need to replenish your ammunition first. This is for you. This is for you. Hold it well, fellow Chinese. We might have a fight to the death tonight. Major David generously handed over the bulletproof vests, rifles, grenades, and magazines to Xia Jinyuan. Why were they so slow? With each person carrying an extra set of equipment, it was natural that they would be slower. After receiving the equipment, Xia Jinyuan reached out his fist and bumped it with Major David's. Nice working with you, Major. Now that they had equipment, they had another layer of protection for their successful retreat. Reporter Chun of One High, who had been protected by the British peacekeeping soldiers, stared at the few black figures who had converged. His eyes stared as if he wanted to tear the darkness of the night apart, so that he could see clearly who the soldiers behind them were. After checking all the equipment, Xia Jinyuan touched the grenade on Bi Yao's waist. The heavy and round feeling of the grenade gave him a sense of security. As a professional soldier, weapons and equipment were his life. Without weapons and equipment, even the most powerful soldier would worry about it. Now that he had weapons and equipment, the cold expression on Xia Jinyuan's face had melted a lot. This time, he really felt that the British peacekeeping soldiers had helped him in his hour of need. Chapter 52-42. The exchange of gunfire continued at the back. Listening to the sound of bullets, one side had set up an anti-aircraft machine gun. The bullets of the anti-aircraft machine gun were thicker than a finger. If one was unlucky and got hit, there would be a bloody hole the size of a bowl wherever it hit. Even if one could be saved, one would still be disabled. No one dared to face the anti-aircraft machine gun head-on, and Xia Jinyuan was no exception. Spreading out the city map, Xia Jinyuan turned on the miniature flashlight. The extremely thin beam shone on the map. Reporter Chun saw the other party's slender hands, which are like a pianist's, slowly moving across the map. Even his movements were like playing the piano. Major, we are now here, Saya Avenue. This is the location of the nightclub, and also the place where the exchange of gunfire is the most concentrated. From here to here, we are currently surrounded by the rebel army. There are dozens of us, and we are too big a target. It will be difficult to break out of the encirclement. He could speak fluent English without an accent. His voice was low, a bit like water dripping from the eaves of a mountain temple after the rain. It was incomparably sweet and had the power to penetrate stone. From his side profile, Reporter Chun judged that the other party was a very young soldier, a soldier from the Chinese side. Chinese soldiers appeared in the nightclub. Reporter Chin's eyes flickered slightly. She moved closer to her colleague. The one who spoke is a Chinese soldier. They appeared in the nightclub. Find a way to see their appearance clearly, draw them, and send them back to the Bay Area. Reporter Chun was the most senior of the 3 Bay Area reporters. The other 2 male reporters were called reporters, but one was in charge of carrying equipment, and the other was in charge of photography and tracking. The male colleague in charge of photography and tracking could draw a good pencil drawing, especially a portrait of a person. With an ordinary pencil, he could draw more than 80% of the other party's appearance. The male colleague, who understood the deep meaning of Reporter Chen's words, nodded and replied softly, I just roughly counted. There should be 6 to 7 of them. We could draw 3 or 4 of them. If the Chinese soldiers came to the nightclub, it will definitely cause a big stir back in China. Their image will be damaged. Well, seize the opportunity. I will cooperate appropriately on my side. Reporter Chun spoke softly, and her voice was full of suppressed excitement. She had been watching the Chinese peacekeepers for more than half a month and had not found a trace of evidence that damaged the image of the Chinese soldiers. Now that the evidence was directly in her hands, how could she miss it? The other male colleague in charge of carrying equipment said regretfully, if we still had our cameras, it would be more convincing. They have always said that the Chinese troops are strict, but now it seems that they're just that. Do you really believe what they say? They are lagging behind everywhere. If they don't stick gold on their faces, who will pay attention to them. Reporter Chen sneered and stared at the Chinese soldiers with contempt. They're just putting on an act. Only their own people think that their soldiers are very good and powerful. Keep a close eye on them and remember every word they say. The fluent English in the front corner never stopped, and there were even some professional terms that she didn't understand. Reporter Chun sneered contemptuously. I really didn't expect this Chinese soldier to speak English. Looks like you've trained him well. Looking around again, Reporter Chun tried to find the person who had suddenly appeared and scared her, but she couldn't find him. She retracted her gaze and continued to stare at Xia Jinyuan, who was talking to the British soldiers. The other Chinese soldiers didn't appear. It seems that he's the only one who can speak English. Don't expect a country with poor education and no quality to be strong. What Ajun said makes a lot of sense. The male colleague echoed and deeply agreed. Chapter 52-43. The three Gulf reporters muttered to themselves. After some discussion, Xia Jinyuan and Major David decided on the best retreat route. Xia Jinyuan, who had been looking down at the map, suddenly looked up. His sharp gaze swept towards a spot in the darkness. His dark eyes were cold and piercing. Reporter Chan was so shocked that she fell back awkwardly as if she had been hit by something substantial. Chunjun, be careful. Her male colleague saw this and shouted in shock. He quickly reached out to support Reporter Chan, who was falling back. Reporter Chin's real name was Chun Shuzhen. The male colleague's voice was a little loud, especially in the dark and quiet surroundings. The soldiers hiding in the dark glanced coldly in her direction, their faces tense. These people were reporters. How could they not be stupid to death? They were retreating now, but they still dared to make a sound. F***CK. The T6 soldier cursed softly and swallowed the saliva that came out of his mouth. He gripped the rifle in his hand tightly and looked around fiercely. The British reporter who had been rescued hurriedly drew a cross in front of his chest. Finally, he clasped his hands together and prayed to God. Amen. They were also frightened by the sudden sound and broke out in cold sweat. It was Chun Shuzhen's first time being so frightened by someone's gaze that she almost fell down. Therefore, she felt very embarrassed. She also felt that the Chinese soldier who suddenly looked at her coldly was deliberately trying to embarrass her. Low class. She steadied herself and scolded softly and angrily. She sounded angry, but if one listened carefully, they could tell that she was weak. Her voice was very weak. She forced herself to maintain what she thought was her arrogance. In exchange, Xia Jinyuan sneered coldly. See, it's big trouble. I have a headache, but we can't leave them behind. Major David rubbed his temples and said with a headache, if we don't allow her to get out of the car, she will become an illegal detainee. My God, doesn't she know that it's dangerous outside and that she needs to be protected? Xia Jinyuan said calmly. Maybe she thinks that they have enough ability to leave alive. Next time, if they want to leave, we don't have to keep them. Buddy, are you serious? Of course, I'm very serious. I never joke around. Xia Jinyuan put away the city map and replied to Major David politely with a smile. After all, we need to respect their choices. Everyone has their own choices, and no one can restrict them because of this, right? Major David raised his eyebrows. Yes, you're right. I should respect their choice. Major David, who had already seen how troublesome Reporter Chun was, wanted to get rid of him even more than Xia Jinyuan. Unfortunately, they all knew that he was just joking. How could they possibly get rid of him? No matter how big the trouble was, he had to continue to bear it until he brought them out safely. A British soldier stood up and squatted in front of Chun Shuzhen. With a stern face, he said coldly, all of us are in danger now. If you continue to be stupid, please leave immediately. But he was not as patient as Major David. If there were any rebels nearby, all it would take was a bomb to blow everyone up and send them to hell. Reporter Chun, who was frightened, was threatened again. She thought that she was being threatened, and her eyes were filled with anger. Your attitude towards reporters is very bad. It's a serious violation of the professional ethics that peacekeeping soldiers should have. You don't know how to respect others. I feel ashamed of you. Chapter 5244. At that moment, reporter Chen Shuzhen was in a terrible mood. She was disrespected, humiliated, and even threatened. This was the first time Chen Shuzhen, who had been flattered all these years, had experienced this. The difference was so great that she was extremely angry. Remember, madam, the people you feel ashamed of are the ones who risk their lives to save you, the British soldiers said in a low voice. They all wanted to punch this ungrateful woman in the face. However, reporter Chun didn't feel that they had saved her. It would have been better if they didn't mention it, but now that they did, it made her even angrier. She leaned forward slightly and gritted her teeth. It's your arrogance that caused all my investigations to go to waste. Ask your own country's reporters why we were at the nightclub. Bastards. Why were they at the nightclub? The three British reporters who followed the investigation at the nightclub gave the best answer. It also made Xia Jinyuan and Major David understand why the rebels suddenly revolted around the nightclub. The high-ranking official behind the nightclub, Amherst, was also there that night. He secretly met with the two ethnic leaders. Ives, who had rebelled, didn't make a move until today. He suddenly rebelled and tried to kill Amherst in the nightclub, causing the Libyan government to lose another high-ranking official. Amherst was able to become a high-ranking official in the Libyan government because he was the leader of a large ethnic group in Libya. If Amherst was killed, the ethnic group would definitely hate the government, causing the already chaotic Libyan government to become even more unstable. Chen Shuzhen and the other two entered the nightclub because they accidentally recognized Amherst. At that time, Chen Shuzhen only wanted to follow him and then publish a news article that exposed the corruption of the Libyan government's high-ranking officials. She didn't expect to be discovered by Amherst's bodyguards and be detained. The British reporters were just unlucky. They didn't know anything and were arrested because they drank beer with Chen Shuzhen and the other two. Amherst didn't plan to do anything to these reporters. He was just worried that the news would be leaked before the alliance was formed and the anti-government militants would know about it beforehand and take action. He planned to lock them up first and only release them after the alliance was formed. It would only take 3 to 5 days. Chen Shuzhen was an influential author. At the same time, she was also the daughter of a high-ranking official in Wanhai. If something were to happen to her, none of her subordinates would be able to answer to the high-ranking official. That was why they had asked for help. Chen Shuzhen, who had been rescued, had not been cooperative from the beginning. She did not think that her life was saved by the peacekeepers at the risk of their lives. The fundamental reason was that the big news she wanted to secretly track was completely worthless because of her rescue. If she knew about it, the reporters from other countries would definitely know about it as well. Then, if she were to report about it, she would be taking advantage of others and would no longer be able to show her personal ability. Therefore, Chen Shuzhen was very angry. Xia Jinyuan, who had never used violence, cursed in his heart. Damn it. So that was what happened. He didn't believe that the people in the Bay Area didn't know where Chen Shuzhen had gone. He just didn't say it on purpose. Xia Jinyuan stepped on the ground and said coldly in English, "If you think that we are delaying you, okay, you have two choices. First, you can leave and return to the nightclub to report the latest battle situation. Second, follow us closely and get out of here alive." Chen Shuzhen was still apprehensive of the British soldiers. She was apprehensive of the country behind the British soldiers. Although her words were offensive, she knew her limits. Chapter 5245. Faced with the Chinese soldiers, Chen Shuzhen did not hold back. She looked down on the country behind the Chinese soldiers and had never taken them seriously. "You're threatening me, aren't you?" "Her, I'll follow you out of here alive." "Thank you, but I really don't dare to follow you. Do you think people like you, who don't even have the basic qualities, deserve to be soldiers?" She was very rude and even insulting them. The T6 combatants were already gritting their teeth. Could they teach her a lesson? They really wanted to teach her a lesson. Xia Jinyuan said to Major David, "After we get out of here, please be our witness and remember everything she said to me." Major David, who was also a soldier, was also furious. He nodded with a cold expression. "Okay, bro, I'll remember Everything she said. If you're so cowardly and incompetent, don't drag the soldiers of big country into this. You'll only make us look down on you even more. Chen Shuzhen was not afraid of what she said today getting out. It would be even better if it got out, so that everyone would know how much she looked down on the Chinese soldiers. So what if she looked down on the Chinese soldiers? If he had the guts, he could scold her and beat her up. As long as he dared to lay a hand on her or say anything harsh to her, she would make him regret it for the rest of his life. How could a barbaric, brainless, and uncultured person like him fight with her? Her. The T6 combatant narrowed his eyes and said coldly to V8, "Trying to goad her? It looks like Reporter Chun is really going all out to get dirt on us. What a pity. She's destined to lose against our captain. No one will think you're mute if you don't speak." V8, who was looking coldly at the dark streets of the club, answered calmly. His voice was as soft as a strand of silk. "She'll regret every word she said today." Based on their understanding of Q King, Reporter Chun would definitely be in for it. Xia Jinyuan, who did not fall for the trick, glanced contemptuously at Reporter Chun, who was trying to goad him into action. He chuckled softly. "That IQ of hers is quite worrying. Watch your mouth." The male colleague in charge of tracking the camera stepped forward and pushed Xia Jinyuan away. He shouted, "Damn it, apologize." But before he could reach out his hand, it was grabbed by a British soldier who was staring at him from the side and twisted his hand back. The male colleague, whose wrist was twisted, was in so much pain that his face changed drastically. Before he could cry out in pain, something cold was suddenly pressed against his mouth. It was the butt of a rifle. Once again, he warned, "You have no right to speak here. If you open your mouth again, all your teeth will fall out." The male colleague who had failed to stand up for Chungu and was beaten back instead blushed. He still wanted to say something, but another male colleague secretly pulled him back and reminded him in the local language, "Don't confront the British soldiers. They are not Reporter Chen's target." One sentence was enough to calm the male colleague down. Chen Shuzhen, who had deliberately done this, saw that the Chinese soldiers were not fooled, and her face became even more ugly. She took a deep breath and suppressed the unwillingness in her heart. There was no hurry. There was still time. As long as she followed these Chinese soldiers closely tonight, she would definitely find dirt that would damage the image of the Chinese soldiers. The sneer on Xia Jinyuan's face deepened. Is this what a reporter is like? Huh. Reporter Chen Shuzhen's face darkened even more. She could hear the contempt in this cold, A group of barbaric and low-quality guys actually dare to look down on her. How infuriating. How infuriating. Chapter 5246. Xia Jinyuan didn't want to pay any more attention to Reporter Chun, who had an inexplicable sense of superiority in front of them. He turned his head and asked Major David, "How about we leave in 5 minutes?" "Okay, no problem." Major David made an okay gesture. In the end, Major David listened to the 3 Gulf Coast reporters panting angrily. He was very curious about what the Chinese man said to make the 3 of them so angry. Xia Jinyuan didn't answer his question. He just replied with a faint smile, "But I'm reminding them to pay attention to their identities." 5 minutes were almost up, and the gunfire outside was still incessant. Xia Jinyuan walked to the family of 3 who had been huddled in the corner without saying a word. As he approached, he heard the little boy's long breathing without any worries. The little boy had fallen asleep while listening to the gunfire. Xia Jinyuan squatted down, raised his hand, and precisely touched the little boy's head. He stroked it gently and said, "It's good that you're asleep. Follow behind us later. Don't be afraid. We'll take you to the peacekeeping camp. When you return to China, we'll try our best to help you. But your nationality has changed, so we can only try our best." Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much." The couple was moved to tears and thanked him again. They placed all their hopes of getting out alive on the Chinese soldiers who protected them. Even if their nationality had changed, they still subconsciously believed in the Chinese soldiers. At this moment, they even regretted changing their nationality. The wife held her husband's arm tightly. Her eyes were red and swollen from crying. The night in Libya was still long. The city shrouded in death was filled with smoke. Countless Libyan people couldn't sleep at night and waited for dawn in fear. In fact, there was no difference between night and dawn for them. The city at dawn was also very dangerous and was also shrouded in the flames of war. Therefore, there was no difference between night and dawn. Citizens living in peaceful countries would never know how deep the yearning for peace in war-torn countries was. They longed for peace, they hoped for freedom, and they hoped for miracles. Several black shadows passed through the streets that were hit by gunfire. They moved forward at the fastest speed and entered the next shelter. In front, the British soldiers cleared the way and squatted down every few steps so that the people behind them could follow closely. In the middle, 3 British soldiers covered the 6 reporters as they advanced. T6 and V8 covered the family of 3 as they advanced. Xiat Jinyuan, G3, and the others followed closely behind. There were many people, and they were a big target. Every movement was filled with danger. The light from the cannons illuminated the street, and also illuminated the figures that were running past the street. Quick, quick! Keep up! Keep up! At the front, the British soldiers who were squatting down whispered to each other. Behind them, the footsteps of the soldiers were hurried, and they quickly passed by while muttering, "Go, go, go." Finally, they squatted down tightly under the broken walls, where the air was filled with the smell of gunpowder. One by one, they panted and adjusted for a short period of time. Chen Shuzhen looked at the artillery fire in front of her, and her eyes flashed with fear. She felt that it was a pity that her camera had been taken away, so she couldn't take pictures at such a close distance. As soon as she poked her head out, the British soldier who was staring at her raised his head and pressed it down. He didn't want to sacrifice himself, and he didn't want to sacrifice himself for the stupid reporter next to him, Chen Shuzhen, whose head was pressed so hard that it hit the broken wall, was about to explode. "Let go of your hand. Don't make me angry." The hand that was pressing down on her head left, and the British soldier even wiped it on his pants in disgust. He really felt that it was a little dirty. Fortunately, Chen Shuzhen didn't see the soldier's secret movements. Otherwise, she would be so angry that her soul would leave her body. Chapter 52-47. Go! The British soldiers at the front set off again. They were now passing through the most dangerous area. With the nightclub as the center, the rebel army had surrounded it for at least 3 kilometers. Amherst appeared at the nightclub. Oz had not received the news of Amherst's death, so he had to be wary of Amherst leaving alive. He could hear the footsteps of the rebel soldiers running past him. The government troops were already fighting with the rebel soldiers. Both sides were fighting fiercely, and the bullets and grenades did not stop. The sleeping boy was startled awake. Just as he mumbled, "Daddy," his mouth was covered. He couldn't speak. He couldn't speak. The mother was so nervous that she hugged her husband's arm tightly. She was so scared that her legs were trembling violently. She didn't even have the strength to stand up. Everyone's heartstrings were stretched taut. Once they were discovered by the rebel army, they would not be given a chance to speak, nor would they verify their identities. They would simply sweep them with their anti-aircraft guns, leaving no future trouble. "Surround this place. Quick, surround this place." Before he could finish his sentence, the sound of running footsteps stopped in front of him, and someone shouted loudly. Xia Jinyuan closed his eyes and swallowed softly. The place where they were surrounded was the street that they had just passed through. If they had been a step too late, everyone would have been blocked off. If they had been caught like a turtle in a jar, everyone would have died without a doubt. The 3 British reporters gasped for breath and clenched their fists tightly. As reporters, they were obviously very scared, but they didn't want to miss such a close battle. They couldn't see outside with their eyes wide open, so they could only prick up their ears and listen carefully to the movements outside. They didn't have a camera, but with this close encounter with the rebels, they could write a script and publish everything they had experienced. Chen Shuzhen and the other 2 were the same. They were so scared that their hands and feet were trembling. Their ears were pricked up as they listened carefully to the movements outside. Their thoughts were exactly the same as the British reporters. After about 10 minutes, the British soldiers confirmed that they could leave. The group of people bent their backs and slowly moved away. They could only move. They couldn't walk over at all. If they walked fast, they were afraid that they would kick a stone or something and make a sound, which would alert the rebels who were only one wall away. The sleeping little boy nestled his head on his father's shoulder. Children were actually very sensitive. Although he didn't understand much, he knew that now wasn't the time for him to talk. His small hands hugged his father's neck tightly, and he didn't move at all. He was very obedient. At least the little boy had his parents to rely on. Many children of his age had lost their parents and lived alone. What awaited them was perhaps death. No one spoke. They followed closely step by step. Xia Jinyuan, who was at the back, arched his back. In the dark, he stared at the back with his cold black eyes that seemed to have sword light flashing in them. He signaled his comrades who were a few steps behind him to follow, one in front of the other in order to ensure the safety of the rear. Despite being so careful, an accident still happened. Chun Shuzhen turned her head to look at the rebel army behind her, which was getting further and further away from her. She was distracted and her foot landed a little too heavily. The tip of her shoe kicked something and made a very clear clang sound. The sound was not loud, but with the surroundings so quiet, even if it was not loud, it was still loud. Chapter 52:48. There was a dead silence in the air. Then, the rebel soldiers at the back roared in the local language. They were just testing the waters and did not rush over immediately. However, the frightened Chun Shuzhen screamed because her heartstrings were too tense. Damn it! Quick! Hide! Hide! This time, they had poked the hornet's nest. The woman's voice was sharp to begin with. After hearing her scream, the rebel soldiers at the back did not need to test the waters anymore. Countless whoosh-whoosh sounds of bullets being loaded could be heard. Within a few seconds, the sound of gunshots could be heard. Chun Shuzhen was really scared this time. Her knees were weak, and she was lying on the ground. She didn't know what she should do other than screaming, ah. The British soldiers pulled her back, but when they realized that the woman only knew how to scream and did not know how to quickly hide, they gave up and rolled into the ruins. The V8 and T6 took the family of 3 to cover as quickly as they could. Fortunately, they were on the side of the street where they could temporarily hide in the rubble. Otherwise, they would have been riddled with bullet holes by the rebel soldiers' bullets. Chun Shuzhen, who only knew how to lie there motionlessly, no longer had the arrogance from before. Under the bullets, all of her arrogance disappeared. Despair came crashing down on her like a huge wave in the sea. The Grim Reaper could take her life at any time. Save me, hurry up and save me, she screamed in despair. She did not dare to move and could only stay where she was. The bullets flew over her body. If she wasn't sprawled on the ground, she would have been pierced by the bullets. Xia Jinyuan heard her screams. No matter how much he disliked her, he could not really leave her alone outside. Everyone hid well, and she was the only one outside. Suppress the fire. I'll drag her over. Xia Jinyuan communicated in English through the earpiece. He was speaking to his comrades and also to Major David and the others. It had nothing to do with him. It was because he was a soldier. The special forces of the Snowfield Brigade did not stop Xia Jinyuan. Instead, they calmly replied to their Q-King. Yes, sir. He had to save people and protect his own life. Grabbing the grenade Major David had given him, he pulled it out and held it in his hand. Under the rain of bullets, countless fragments of mud and stone flew everywhere, like small sharp blades, leaving behind small wounds on his bare skin. Xia Jinyuan wiped his cheeks. His cheeks were grazed by debris, and his fingers were pressed against them. He felt a tingling sensation that calmed him down. After putting away his rifle, Xia Jinyuan bent down. His voice was as calm as a mirror as he calmly arranged the next step. Baihe and K7 will be the main attackers. V8 and T6 will suppress them. Z7 and G3 will cover them. I'll call 1, 2, 3. Start. Got it. Got it. Got it. The voices of his comrades could be heard through the earpiece. At this moment, they were Xia Jinyuan's most solid support. With them around, their Q-King would never be in danger. Major David actually did not agree with Xia Jinyuan's actions. He did not want to save a reporter who only knew how to question others and did not know how to be grateful. After saving her, it was very likely that she would wrongly accuse them. Major David did not want to save her at all. However, the Chinese soldier's insistence made him feel helpless. "Buddy, you can totally give up on her," Major David advised. "The fire is too strong. You don't have enough confidence to save her. Just now, my comrades wanted to save her, but she was too stupid and did not know how to cooperate. I can tell you very seriously, buddy. She will definitely drag you down and even kill you. Do you still choose to save her?" Chapter 52-49. Xia Jinyuan, who was making the final adjustments, knew that Major David was thinking for him. His thin lips curved up slightly. "Major, thank you for your advice. I have to save her. It's my duty to protect any Chinese citizen, even if the people outside didn't recognize her as a Chinese citizen." Major David was silent for a few seconds before he replied, "Okay, I respect your decision. We'll cooperate with you. I hope you can come back alive." "I'll come back alive." Xia Jinyuan's smile deepened as he held onto the grenade. His little fox was still waiting for him. How could he miss her? 1, 2, 3. Suppress. Xia Jinyuan's cold voice came from the earpiece. The soldiers of the Shui Yu Brigade concentrated their firepower to suppress the rebels, while Major David and the rest dispersed the rebels' firepower. Both sides cooperated, and the gunshots were dense and bullets rained down. Chun Shuzhen was scared out of her wits. She hugged her head and couldn't even scream. She was trembling all over like a dog that had fallen into the water in winter. She no longer had the arrogance of the past. In the ruins, Chun Shuzhen's two colleagues were so scared that they hugged each other tightly. They didn't even know that Chun Shuzhen didn't even try to hide. Life and death situations were the best test of human nature. For example, these two male colleagues would try to curry favor with Chun Shove because of her identity. However, when it came to life and death situations, they would run away faster than anyone else. If they lost their lives, everything would be in vain. The newly immigrated couple only knew how to hug their son tightly. The family of three huddled together and leaned on each other for warmth. In the darkness, the fear in their eyes was a fear that they would never experience again. "Daddy, I'm scared." The little boy's soft voice drifted clearly into his father's ears. His father, who was also scared, could hide his fear well in front of his son who needed his protection. He kissed his son's delicate face and comforted him softly. "Don't be scared. We're brave men. Don't be scared. Do you know who's been protecting us? They're uncles from the People's Liberation Army. With them around, we don't have to be afraid." "What do the People's Liberation Army uncles do? Why don't we have to be afraid with them around?" Although the little boy was afraid, he was still an ignorant representative who did not know the difference between life and death. His attention was quickly diverted as he asked his father curiously, "The uncles from the People's Liberation Army can defeat the bad guys and save our Chi-Chi. They are very powerful, even more powerful than Superman. As long as they are here, we will be very safe. Wasn't Chi-Chi separated from Daddy and Mommy before?" In the end, it was the People's Liberation Army uncle who sent Chi-Chi back to Daddy and Mommy's side. He even saved Daddy and Mommy. "Chi-Chi, don't you think the People's Liberation Army uncle is very powerful?" The ignorant child's understanding was limited. Even after his father's explanation, he still did not fully understand. He blinked his innocent eyes and whispered, "Is it true that as long as the People's Liberation Army uncle who is as powerful as Superman doesn't leave, we will be safe? Will the People's Liberation Army uncle send us home?" "The People's Liberation Army uncle will send us home, so Chi-Chi is not afraid. With the People's Liberation Army uncle here, Daddy and Mommy here, Chi-Chi is not afraid." His father coaxed him patiently. He was clearly so scared that his hands and feet were trembling. He tried his best to control his voice and make it sound calm so that his son would feel safe. He had to coax his son. He was afraid that his son would cry. Chapter 52-50. Just now, the Bay-Sea reporter made a small mistake and caused everyone to be discovered by the rebel soldiers. If his child was scared to tears, he didn't even dare to think about the consequences. Mommy raised her hand to hug her son's head and planted a deep kiss on his forehead. "Good boy, Chi-Chi. Sleep a little longer. Chi-Chi will be home when you wake up. With the company of his parents and Superman's protection, Chi-Chi, who was scared by the gunshots, calmed down, hugged his father's neck tightly, and closed his eyes. The little boy's relaxation made his father heave a sigh of relief. Then, he leaned his tense body against the cold and uneven broken wall behind him. The night wind wrapped in smoke blew in through the cracks, and he was shocked to realize that his son had broken out in a cold sweat. He was even prepared to cover his son's mouth if he cried. Fortunately, his son was sensible and didn't make a big fuss. He held his son with one hand and gently stroked his wife's thin back with the other. He didn't forget to kiss the top of his wife's head. "Don't be afraid. For Chi-Chi, we can't fall." For the sake of their son, the couple couldn't fall. Xia Jinyuan, who had rushed out in front, had already disregarded his own life. He rushed out from the cover and quickly rolled forward to find the next cover. The bullets hit his right shoulder with a bang sound. The cover was densely hit by the bullets, leaving dense craters one after another. The flying dust and debris formed a net that blurred his vision. A few specks of dust mixed with the smoke and entered his eyes. Xia Jinyuan, whose eyes were slightly stinging, took a deep breath and fearlessly rolled forward again. He could only roll forward, and there was no way he could run in the rain of bullets. The well-prepared rebel soldiers' firepower was quite fierce. They even thought that the target of the gunfire was the escaped senior official Amherst, and asked for backup. The rebel soldiers who were attacking the nightclub with all their might didn't think that Amherst had escaped. They thought that it might be the government troops who came to pick up Amherst. After a short discussion, the rebel soldiers decided to focus on both areas and increase their firepower. But he heard the sound of empty bullets in the magazine. He quickly retracted his rifle, huddled back in the cover, and reloaded as fast as he could. They could feel the increase in firepower. Major David's face became more and more serious. They should retreat. If they didn't, they would all meet God. "We need to retreat immediately." In the earpiece, Major David gritted his teeth and said, "The rebels have too much firepower, and we can't fight them to the end. Comrades from the Chinese side, we must retreat." Bullets whizzed past Major David's ears, and he could not raise his head under the pressure of the increased firepower. Damn it, he had to think of a way to retreat. Even if they wanted to retreat, they had to bring the rescued reporters with them. Whether they could get out of here alive depended on God's blessing. After shouting, Major David jumped and nimbly avoided the wall that was penetrated by the bullets. Major David, who hurriedly hid, saw the deadly bullets whizzing through the air and shooting towards the ruins where they were hiding. Xia Jinyuan, who could not move under the pressure of the rebel army's firepower, was panting. He answered Major David calmly. "Major, arrange for 2 or 3 soldiers to take the reporters away. We will hold them off first." "Okay." Major David agreed. While they were still able to hold on, they had to take the people away while they could. Chapter 52-51. Major David, who was close to the cover, immediately arranged for the soldiers to take them away. "Alan, Libby, take them away. Remember our retreat route and meet up with Libby's government soldiers. Tell them we need their support." Damn it, what they needed the most now was support. "Yes, Major." The 2 British peacekeepers who received the order retracted their guns that had been firing. They crouched down beside the reporters who were huddled together and told them that the 2 of them were now leading the retreat. On the battlefield, the reporters who could argue until they had nothing to say could only obediently listen to the arrangements. The 3 British reporters naturally trusted their country's soldiers and nodded without hesitation to show that they understood. The family of 3 also chose to leave together. The 2 Gulf reporters were afraid that they would be left behind. When they learned that they left first, the 2 were relieved. At this moment, the 2 realized that reporter Chen Shuzhen, whom they had been trying to curry favor with, was not with them. They were shocked. Chun, where is reporter Chun?" The reporter in charge of the camera asked his colleague. The male colleague was frightened by the question and stammered, No. Isn't she with you?" In the darkness, the 2 looked at each other. Although they could not see each other's expression, they knew that the other party's expression must be very bad. It's over. Reporter Chun is not with them. Go. Without waiting for the two to recover from a shock, their shoulders were pushed forward by the British soldiers. The two did not have time to think and followed the footsteps of the British soldiers. Reporter Chun is not with them. Chun. Where did Reporter Chun go? They did not dare to think about it, because they were thinking of the worst. They did not dare to think about it, or go out to look for it. Who dared? Did they want to die? Since they did not dare to think about it, or go out to look for it, they should obediently follow the British soldiers. But with only 2 soldiers escorting the 8 of them, would it work? They did not have the courage to ask for more soldiers to escort them. Listening to the terrifying gunshots that made their souls scream, the 2 Gulf reporters hugged their heads and left the crossfire. The remaining British soldiers used their firepower to cover their brothers and leave with the rescued people. Major David, who was panting, shot fiercely at the street. Kill the machine gunner! Kill the machine gunner! The anti-aircraft gun was so heavy that no one could poke their bodies out. If they didn't get rid of the machine gunner and the rebel army closed in, they would have no other choice but to die. The special forces of the Snowfield Brigade who were suppressing them did not say anything. They focused all their attention on the rebel soldiers who were only 1 street away from them. The bullets from the anti-aircraft machine guns forced them to lower their heads and shoot blindly with their rifles. Xia Jinyuan panted. Think of a way to get rid of the machine gunner. Damn it, we can't move forward. The power of the high-dodge machine gun bullets was too great. Even if the bullets only brushed past the skin, it would still leave a very deep wound that looked like it had been branded by a red-hot iron. Xia Jinyuan did not know how Chen Shuzhen, who had been outside, was doing at the moment. If she had been lying down, she might still be alive. If she had gotten up, she would have been dead by now. She didn't speak when she should, but when she shouldn't, she was very cheerful. K7 put away his rifle and said calmly, "I'll go kill the machine gunner. You guys cover the captain." His voice was calm, as if he was not on the battlefield. "Be careful." K7, who used to be a playboy, was now a responsible person. He held his rifle and shot at the target in front of him with a fierce look in his eyes. Chapter 52. They couldn't shoot blindly. They didn't have enough bullets, so they had to be careful. V8 and T6 became the main suppressive force. G3, who was hidden, aimed at the front. Almost every shot was accurate. Bai He, with a cold look, asked Xia Jinyuan, who was silent, "Have you found him?" He was outside, so everyone was worried that something might have happened when he didn't make a sound. Xia Jinyuan, who couldn't move forward, wiped his smoke-stained lips. His eyes were dark and cold. "She shouldn't be dead. I think she's still some distance away." Judging from the position of her scream, she should be under the electric pole that was blown down by the artillery. If she wasn't dead, then the electric pole must have acted as a cover. G3, who had blown up a few rebel soldiers' heads, put away the rifle that needed to be reloaded. He breathed heavily and said calmly, "K7, kill the machine gunner. We'll add more ammunition. After we rescue her, we'll retreat while fighting." If they continued fighting like this, they would run out of bullets. Once they ran out of bullets, they would die. They were speaking in Chinese. Major David didn't understand Chinese at all. He fought until his eyes were red and looked like they were about to bleed. He said helplessly, "I'm very sorry, my friend. I can't understand what you're talking about. Can you speak in a language that I can understand?" "Thank you. My brother suggested that we kill the machine gunner first, then give them a few grenades. After we rescue her, we'll retreat while fighting." Xia Jinyuan spoke quickly in English. A few bullets suddenly hit the wall that was covering him. The wall that was blown to the side of the street was instantly shaved off by the bullets. Xia Jinyuan, who reacted quickly, immediately went from half-squatting to crawling. He didn't want his head to be cut in half by the bullets. His cover was very small. It was just a corner of the wall that was blown to the side of the street by the artillery. One side was high, while the other side was low. It was just enough to hide him. If he was hit by the bullets, he would be exposed and become a live target. Major David thought that it was a good idea. Then, they should kill the machine gunner first. Xia Jinyuan, who didn't fire to prevent himself from being exposed, crouched on the ground and waited for K7 to kill the machine gunner first. 7 Chinese special forces and 8 British peacekeepers. 15 people faced hundreds of rebel soldiers together. After 10 minutes of fighting, they didn't suffer any losses. There were no casualties. On the other hand, the rebel army suffered heavy casualties. The dozen or so rebel soldiers who had broken through the encirclement had already met their maker. Coupled with the dozen or so wounded rebel soldiers, the remaining rebel soldiers were stunned and did not dare to move forward. They kept using their machine guns to suppress the enemy, afraid that the enemy would counterattack. With the darkness as cover, K7 passed through rows of ruins and came to the corner of the street. The place where they exchanged fire was a cross street, with the middle street as the crossfire area. The upper right corner was the rebel soldiers, and the corresponding lower left corner was the peacekeepers of the two countries. The K7 that had reached the intersection of the two armies was very, very close to the rebel soldiers. It was so close that he could see the enemy's heavy machine gun after setting up the rifle and adjusting the scope. Aimed at the heavy machine gunner. Aiming at the target, K7 pulled the trigger with a calm face. Cover! Just as he finished his sentence, the gunshot rang out. The bullet pierced through the air and hit the enemy's head directly. Bang! The fierce machine gunner had half of his head cut off by the bullet. His brain was crushed, and his brain juice mixed with blood splattered onto the face of the assistant machine gunner who was firing the bullet beside him, blurring his vision. He realized something and yelled. He raised the machine gun that he had lost control of and was about to take his place. His hands touched the machine gun. He didn't even have time to fire a single bullet. His body suddenly froze and his eyes widened. His whole body fell backward. Chapter 52-53. In just a few seconds, the machine gunner and assistant machine gunner were all shot and killed. No one dared to touch the machine gun again. There's a sniper. Damn it, they have a sniper. The two machine gunners fell one after the other. The rebel soldiers thought that they had encountered a sniper, but they did not expect a peacekeeper to quickly retreat under the cover of his comrades. Without the heavy machine gun's fire and with the enemy's panic, Xia Jinyuan was able to find out Qin Shuzhen's approximate location. According to the British soldiers who covered her retreat, Xia Jinyuan quickly found the target. She found the target and was lying under the electrical wires. Xia Jinyuan slowly crept forward until he was close enough that she could hear him. He asked in a low voice, "Are you okay? Can you still walk?" Qin Shuzhen did not answer. Xia Jinyuan's heart sank slightly. He crept to her side and pressed his fingers on her neck artery. Her pulse was normal. She was still alive. He shouted, "Reporter Chun," again. She still did not answer. Xia Jinyuan slowly pressed his lips together and reached out to press on Qin Shuzhen's philtrum. She had fainted from shock. He had to wake her up. The eyes of Qin Shuzhen, who was in pain, moved slightly. As the pain became more and more intense, her dizzy brain slowly woke up. The sound of gunshots rang in her ears, and finally, Reporter Chun, who had fainted at some point in time, woke up with a start. Ugh. She woke up and remembered where she was. Fear engulfed her like a monster. She could not control her voice at all. She screamed again. Xia Jinyuan did not give her a chance to scream. He put on combat gloves and quickly covered her mouth. He warned her sternly, "Shut up if you don't want to die. Lie down and don't move." Qin Shuzhen's eyes widened when she heard a familiar voice. Her breathing stagnated for a few seconds before she reacted. Tears streamed down her face as she nodded vigorously. Okay. I won't scream. I won't move." She only nodded once. Xia Jinyuan immediately retracted his hand and pressed it on his earpiece. "We found her. She's not dead. Cover the retreat." "Okay." Z7's cheerful voice came through. He had been holding it in for more than 10 minutes. He was about to die from holding it in. If it wasn't dead, then it was alive. Major David even whistled. "Awesome. You're the fiercest warrior I've ever seen." It was not the fiercest warrior to save someone from the bullets of a machine gun. If it were him, he really wouldn't have the courage. Retreating was also very difficult, but it was much smoother than rescuing Qin Shuzhen. With suppressive fire and less machine gun fire, Xia Jinyuan first asked Chen Shuzhen to crawl and retreat. Remember, when I tell you to run, get up and run immediately. Do you remember? Chen Shuzhen, who was so scared that she couldn't even speak properly, nodded. She was scared to death, and her body was still trembling. At this moment, her inexplicable sense of superiority was gone. Her contempt for the Chinese soldiers was also gone. If she were to say anything bad about the Chinese soldiers again, she wouldn't dare. Without wiping away her tears, she bit her lower lip and crawled towards the ruins that Xia Jinyuan was pointing at. She didn't want to die. She didn't want to die. She wanted to go home alive. She wanted to go home. Chen Shuzhen, who had always thought that she was brave enough to pass through the flames of war alone, was now really soft. She had learned an unforgettable lesson and no longer dared to think that she was brave enough. Hearing the sound of crawling behind him, Xia Jinyuan pulled out a grenade, pulled the safety pin, and threw it towards the opposite corner of the street. Chapter 52-54. Boom! The grenade exploded. Xia Jinyuan turned around and pulled up the Gulf Coast reporter who was lying on the ground, not daring to move. He shouted, "Run!" Stepping on the sparks from the grenade, he ran with the reporter. Finally, he grabbed the reporter's shoulder with one hand and rolled into the water, finally successfully retreating. Go, retreat, retreat. Major David shouted. At the same time, several grenades were thrown at the corner of the street. Among the broken beams and broken walls, dozens of black figures ran quickly and retreated. Behind them, the special forces of the Snowfield Brigade successfully suppressed the enemy's firepower and also retreated quickly. Bullets swept past their heels, and countless debris flew around them. The Special Forces soldiers held their rifles tightly and ran across countless debris. Their figures were as fast as lightning, running through the abandoned buildings that had long been abandoned and destroyed. They retreated at a speed that ordinary people could not match. Chen Shuzhen ran. She had never run like this before. She ran until her lungs were full of air. Her knees were weak and she had fallen countless times, but she still ran. She ran with the British soldiers. The Chinese soldiers who saved her did not protect her anymore and directly pushed her into the hands of the British soldiers. The continuous attacks of the grenades made the rebel soldiers not dare to move. They only dared to shoot fiercely with the rifles in their hands. In the end, they were chasing and shooting. The command center of the British peacekeeping forces received a letter from the Libyan government. They said that several British peacekeepers were exchanging fire with the rebel soldiers and the government had sent reinforcements. The commander-in-chief of the Chinese peacekeeping forces also received the same letter. There was finally news of the missing peacekeepers, but they were still exchanging fire with the rebel soldiers. At 8 o'clock in the morning in China, there was the latest news on the military channel. The missing peacekeepers had been found. Everyone was safe and there were no casualties. Director Xia turned off the television, stood up from his sofa, and walked to the study. Everyone was safe and there were no casualties. Not bad. Du Jiayi woke up and saw her father, the Deputy Chief of Staff Du, watching the international channel in front of the television early in the morning. She shuffled over in her slippers and sat down beside the Deputy Chief of Staff Du. She hugged the Deputy Chief of Staff Du's arm and said coquettishly, "Dad, why are you watching such bloody scenes so early in the morning? We're already home. Can't you rest well?" The Deputy Chief of Staff Du, who had always doted on his youngest daughter, raised his hand and pretended to be angry. He patted his daughter's head. "What bloody scenes? This is to tell you how hard it is to live in a peaceful country. You left the army for a few years. You deserve it. Dad, you're hurting." Du Jiayi hugged the Deputy Chief of Staff's arm. In the end, the Deputy Chief of Staff didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Okay, why are you still acting like a child? Even your nephew isn't so delicate. Aren't you? Why? Where are you going to play?" Du Jiayi sat up straight and thought for a while. She said, "I'm going shopping with Aunt Qin. I have to go there early to wait. Sigh, in order to find a good son-in-law for you, I've put in a lot of effort." The deputy chief of staff, Du, was very satisfied with Qin Xiu. However, he didn't know that Qin Xiu disliked Du Jiai very much. When he saw his daughter going out to play with Mother Qin from time to time, he thought that his daughter had gained the approval of the entire Qin family. He smiled and said, "Since we've already met, and you're not young anymore, when will you find time to meet our parents and settle your matter? The sooner you get married, the sooner I'll be a grandfather." Chapter 52-55. The deputy chief of staff, Du, liked his younger daughter very much. He didn't teach his older daughter much. Although their relationship was good, he was not as close as his younger daughter. Although both the palms and the back of the hands were flesh, the length of the 5 fingers was different. He knew that he was biased towards his younger daughter. He didn't urge his younger daughter to find a boyfriend and get married early because he wanted to keep his daughter by his side for a few more years. After all, when a girl got married, she would not be as free as she was in her parents' home. The Qin family was also a wealthy and influential family. The previous few generations had all been influential and powerful. On the other hand, the previous few generations of the Du family were all poor farmers. It was only in his hands that they changed their family name. After all, without the support of his family, even if he was the deputy chief of staff, he couldn't put on airs in front of the Qin family. Why are you still so childish? You're not young anymore. If we keep you, you'll really become an old lady." The deputy chief of staff, Du, patted the back of his daughter's hand gently and sighed. "I've kept you for many years. Your sister is already so old. Her child is already 3 years old." Du Jiai, who wanted to coax her into going over, felt her heart skip a beat. Her father wasn't joking. "You and Qin Xiu have been together for many years. Since that's the case, let's do it early. The man should take the initiative to bring up the matter of the parents' meeting. You can remind Qin Xiu indirectly and let the Qin family set the date. Our family just needs to cooperate. It's just a formality. There's no need for too much etiquette." The deputy chief of staff, Du, who always thought that his daughter and Qin Xiu were in a relationship, arranged it very carefully. In his eyes, Du Jiai specially retired from the army and went to work in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs for Qin Xiu. The Qin family also sent his daughter over from time to time. It could be seen that the relationship between the two young people was very stable. The Qin family was also very satisfied with his daughter. Now that they were old enough, they still had to do what needed to be done. Then again, the two young people had been in a relationship for so long. Why had Qin Xiu never come to the Du family? No matter how busy he was at work, it was fine for him to take a day to visit his future parents-in-law. Why had he never been here before? The deputy chief of staff, Du, asked in a very serious tone. Du Jiai panicked and her eyes flickered. She didn't dare to look at the deputy chief of staff, Du, as he panicked. The deputy chief of staff, Du, saw through the clues. Frowning, he asked, "What's wrong? Do you think our Du family is too small and unwilling to come over?" Seeing that Du Jiai didn't even dare to look at him, deputy chief of staff Du's face darkened. He picked up the remote control and turned off the TV, preparing to question her. Du Jiai, who had a guilty conscience, did not dare to face him. Seeing this, she hurriedly got up and pretended to be calm. "Dad, you're thinking too much. Ashio really doesn't have the time. Otherwise, he would have come to visit you long ago." She pretended to look at her watch and exclaimed, It's already so late. Dad, take your time watching TV. I have to go out." Deputy Chief of Staff, Du, was naturally capable to be able to reach this position today. He had seen Du Jiai's attempt to hide it. She couldn't hide it at all. His face darkened even more than before. He shouted in a deep voice, "Sit down. If you don't make things clear today, you're not allowed to go anywhere." Deputy Chief of Staff Du, who had always been kind to his youngest daughter and rarely got angry, had a face so cold that Du Jiai's legs trembled. She knew that her father was serious this time. No, she couldn't see the problem. If her father saw the problem, she wouldn't even be able to see Aunt Qin again. Du Jiai, who had sat down, was so panicked that her little fingers were trembling. Her brain was spinning quickly, trying to think of a good way to solve the problem in front of her and appease the suspicious deputy chief of staff Du. Chapter 52-56. Du Jiayi was smart and had quick reflexes. Faced with the deputy chief of staff Du's anger, she didn't give up immediately even though she was scared and flustered. Instead, she tried her best to find a way out of this predicament. Right now, she had to appease her father. Ever since she left the Qin residence last time, Aunt Qin had specially called to explain that she was the one who had delayed her. Now, Qin Xiu hadn't changed his mind, and the two elders of the Qin family had allowed Qin Xiu to stay out of it. She didn't want to interfere anymore and didn't want to delay her anymore. For this reason, she had specially given her a pair of high-quality jade bracelets as compensation. Since then, Aunt Qin really hadn't contacted her, let alone seen her. She had finally reconnected with Mrs. Qin, who had stopped seeing her after she left the Qin residence last time. She had put in so much effort to keep in contact with the Qin family. How could another accident happen? If another accident happened, everything she had done would be in vain. What she couldn't forget would become a lifelong regret. More importantly, that Tch Yi Qian might get her wish and marry Qin Xiu in the end. Now, she was staying by Aunt Qin's side to make Aunt Qin hate Yi Qian more and more. If her father found out that she wasn't with Qin Xiu, it definitely wouldn't allow her to see Aunt Qin again. Then, she wouldn't be able to find out how far Qin Xiu and Yi Qian had progressed. She also wouldn't be able to make Aunt Qin continue to hate Yi Qian. She had worked so hard for so long. How could she allow her hard work to go to someone else? After calming herself down, Du Jiayi hugged the deputy chief of staff Du's arm again. Her voice was softer and more delicate. Dad, why are you angry all of a sudden? Ashio just didn't come to our house. Why are you angry? Isn't that normal? If you let him come to our house, I won't be happy. She wrinkled her nose, looking like a spoiled girl. The suspicious deputy chief of staff, Du, was not so easily fooled, but his expression turned for the better. He snorted faintly. Is that so? Why are you unhappy? Ashio is such a good person. After he visits you, you will definitely urge me to get married quickly. I won't get married early. I still want to accompany you and mother for a few more years. She had a sweet mouth and was very good at coaxing people. The deputy chief of staff, Du, also liked her. But this time the situation was different. This was a matter that concerned his daughter's life. The deputy chief of staff, Du, was very cautious and could not tolerate the slightest mistake. The deputy chief of staff, Du, who hadn't been coaxed, grew even more suspicious. Jiayi, you're hiding something from me. I'll give you a chance to make things clear. If you continue to hide it, I will contact Qin Xiu directly. With Dad's ability, it's very easy to contact Qin Xiu. You can choose to hide it, but Dad will talk to Qin Xiu directly. You can do as you see fit. Du Jiayi, who had deliberately tried to coax and hide it, turned ashen when she heard this. How could she hide it? How could she hide it? Her father said that he would personally call Qin Xiu. How could she hide it? Her moves were not on the same level. They directly blocked all of Du Jiayi's excuses and excuses. She had no choice but to tell the truth. She believed that her father was a man of his words. She also believed that it would be very easy to contact Qin Xiu. When the deputy chief of staff, Du, saw his daughter's expression, he felt as if a sharp weapon had been twisted into a hole in his heart. The coldness started from his heart, and even his hands and feet turned cold. You don't want to talk about it? Okay, I'll call Qin Xiu right now. The deputy chief of staff, Du, who had a gloomy expression, pretended to take out his phone and said, although the Qin family is a wealthy family, the daughter of the Du family is not that easy to bully. I'll personally ask him and get to the bottom of this. Chapter 52-57. Although he said that, the deputy chief of staff, Du's heart was extremely cold. If his daughter had been wronged by Qin Xiu, she shouldn't be so scared. His daughter's fear was more like she was afraid that he would call Qin Xiu and confirm it himself. Why would she be scared? She shouldn't have reacted like this. The cold-hearted deputy chief of staff, Du, became more and more confused. His intuition told him that the matter between his daughter and Qin Xiu was not that simple. There were many things he didn't know about. Knowing that her father meant what he said, Du Jiayi no longer pretended. She showed a miserable smile, and tears came out of her eyes before she spoke. Seeing this, the deputy chief of staff breathed a sigh of relief. If you've been wronged, you should tell your mother and me. You shouldn't shoulder it alone. Did Chinshio bully you? Did the two of you have a conflict? The deputy chief of staff who didn't know anything, thought that the two young people had a conflict. He didn't think about it at all, and didn't think that he almost fainted from anger. Du Jai was still crying a second ago, and the next second, she was smiling. The smile was uglier than crying, and it scared the deputy chief of staff. He raised his voice and became angry again. What the hell is going on? Tell me, did I let you down? If it was bullying or letting you down, at least the two of them used to be together. But no, never. Pulling the deputy chief of staff Du's sleeves tightly, Du Jai told the truth one by one. Dad, I lied to you. I didn't get together with Chinshio at all. The more she spoke, the more the deputy chief of staff Du's face became darker and darker. In the end, his eyes burst with terrible anger. In other words, you've been throwing yourself at him all these years. Chinshio, didn't even look at you, right? The deputy chief of staff asked through gritted teeth. He felt that his chest was about to explode from anger. His breathing was rapid, and his vision was turning black. Du Jai didn't dare to hide it now. She was afraid that the deputy chief of staff would really call Chinshio to ask. At that time, she would lose all face in front of Chinshio. Seeing the deputy chief of staff Du's face turn frighteningly ashen, Du Jai, who was both afraid and aggrieved, cried until her lips turned white. She was so scared that she didn't dare to continue speaking. However, the deputy chief of staff who was so angry that he almost fainted, did not give Du Jai a chance to escape. Answer me honestly. If you dare to hide anything from me again, today. His hand reached for his waist, as if he was reaching for a gun. Du Jai's shoulders trembled as she said miserably, yes. I was the one who threw myself at him. But what could I do? Dad, a slap? A heavy slap was thrown. The sound was so loud that even the servant who was busy preparing breakfast heard it. She was so scared that she ran out while wiping her hands. What's wrong? Why are you so angry so early in the morning? The servant hired by the Du family was none other than the deputy chief of staff Du's cousin. In the past, the deputy chief of staff Du's family was so poor that they didn't even have food to eat. It was his cousin's family who helped them every now and then. Therefore, although this cousin did housework for the Du family, she had always been respected by the deputy chief of staff Du. Even Madame Li and her children respected her very much. When she came out, she saw that Miss Jiao, who had always been pampered and coaxed by everyone, had a clear handprint on her fair face. The slap was so fierce that her fingers were red and frightening. This, how could she be slapped? It was the first time that she saw Miss Jiao, who could do whatever she wanted and no one dared to offend, being slapped. And it was by the person who loved her the most. Chapter 52-58. The atmosphere in the living room was so heavy that Du Jai, who had just been slapped, didn't even dare to cry. Sister Fong, you can go back to your work. The deputy chief of staff didn't want his cousin to know about his family's embarrassing matter. I have something to discuss with Jai in private. Sister Fong hesitated for a moment before advising. You should talk to the children properly. Don't get angry. What can anger solve? You should talk to them properly. In the end, she didn't dare to stay any longer. She looked at Du Jai with some heartache before returning to the kitchen to continue preparing breakfast. Even though the children all obediently called her Aunt Fong, sigh, let's not talk about it anymore. I don't want to annoy my cousin-in-law. In the living room, the deputy chief of staff couldn't afford to lose face. Seeing that Sister Fong had left, he stood up with an ashen face. Go to the study, you disgraceful thing. Du Jai, who had slapped so hard that half of her face was numb, stood up. She wanted to escape, but where could she escape to? Getting slapped was already a very good result. Just now, she almost thought that she was going to be shot dead by her own father. After entering the study and closing the door, the deputy chief of staff was so angry that his lungs were about to explode. He pointed at the floor and roared with trembling fingers, "Kneel down." Du Jiai, who had never been hit before, did not dare to retaliate. With a put-on sound, her knees went straight to the ground as she lowered her head and arched her body. Her beautiful black hair hung loosely over her pale face. "You still have a cheek to cry. You still have a cheek to cry. You've completely disgraced me." The deputy chief of staff, Du, slammed the desk so hard that he didn't even notice that his palms were hurting. "I'm the daughter of a deputy chief of staff, yet I'm rushing to throw myself at him. He's not interested at all. I've already made it clear time and time again, but I don't have the face to continue sticking to him. I'm humiliating myself like this. I'm humiliating myself like this. Du Jiai, do you still see me as your father? You still have your mother in your eyes." Suddenly, the deputy chief of staff Du's voice stopped abruptly. Then, as if he had thought of something, he clenched his fists and pressed them against the desk. Word by word, his voice was as cold as the cold wind blowing in the late winter night. It was so cold that it hurt the bones. "Did your mother indulge you? Did she know everything? Give me a clear explanation." She must have known. Otherwise, with her shrewdness, it was impossible for her not to have noticed that her daughter had been shamelessly sticking to Qin Xiu for the past few years without being together with him. He was absolutely clear about it and had been secretly helping his daughter to hide it. He even supported his daughter to throw herself at Qin Xiu. The deputy chief of staff Du, whose whole body was trembling with anger, no longer questioned Du Jiai. Suppressing his anger, he picked up the phone in the study with a pa sound, pressed the numeric keys one by one, and dialed a group of numbers. The phone was connected. Without any sound from the other side, the deputy chief of staff Du, who was so angry that there was blood in his throat, squeezed out one word after another from between his teeth. "Li Chenglan, go home right now. Right now." Li Chenglan was Mrs. Li's maiden name. For the past 2 days, Mrs. Li had been taking care of old man Li in the hospital, who had been hospitalized because of another stroke. She had lost a lot of weight in the past 2 days. Hearing her husband's cold voice, Mrs. Li was not so good-tempered as she replied, "I'm taking care of my father in the hospital. If you have something to do, come to the hospital by yourself." Since Li Chuhai left, the couple had not had a good conversation. The deputy chief of staff, Duke, did not like that Mrs. Li had abandoned her own family for the Li family. Mrs. Li did not like that the deputy chief of staff, Du, who had relied on the Li family to get to where he was today, turned his back on her. The two sides were in a deadlock, and it was difficult for them to maintain mutual respect. Chapter 52-59. Mrs. Li's temper had always been strong, and she always had the final say in the family. The deputy chief of staff used to think that there was no problem. He thought that with a strong wife in the family, she would manage the family well and not distract him. In fact, it was true. Since he married Mrs. Li, the Du family began to clean the mud on their legs little by little. Step by step, they walked from the fields to the road, then to the broad road, and finally to the status they had today. However, all of this happened when Li Chuhai came back from abroad and committed a series of crimes. In the end, the deputy chief of staff, Du, was almost fired. Mrs. Li still did things her own way and didn't realize that the Li family was on the decline. She even asked the deputy chief of staff, Du, to get involved in Li Chuhai's affairs and try to save Li Chuhai through her husband. It was related to the future, and Li Chuhai's crimes were related to the country. Even if the deputy chief of staff, Du, respected his wife, he couldn't do it. If he did, he would be going against the country. Going against the country? Did one die? The deputy chief of staff, Du, didn't do it, and Mrs. Li made a fuss. As a result, the couple's phone call was full of tension. Mrs. Li didn't say anything more. She ended the call and turned the phone to silent mode. In recent years, no matter how thick the makeup was, it couldn't hide the gloomy expression on her aged face. Let her go home immediately? The head of the family was the army. Was she a soldier? If something happened, come to the hospital yourself. She wanted him to come to the hospital? Dream on. Chenglan. Old Madam Li's tired voice came from a ward. Mrs. Li, who walked out of the ward to answer the phone, opened the door and entered. "Mom, why are you awake? Sleep a little longer. It's still early." The ward was a high-class ward with one bedroom and one living room. Only people of Old Man Lee's status could get such treatment. 2 days ago, Old Man Lee had a stroke. Old Madam Lee insisted on staying in the hospital to take care of him. Mrs. Lee had no choice but to stay with him. Fortunately, she didn't need to do anything. There were nurses and nurses. She just needed to watch over him. Even so, Mrs. Lee, who had stayed in the hospital for 2 days, didn't eat well. She was already in her early 60s. How could she compare to young people? But there was no other way. Old Man Lee insisted on staying in the hospital. Old Man Lee was still lying in the intensive care unit. He had only woken up once. As his daughter, she had to accompany him. She came over to put the pillow down and helped old Madame Xiao Li to sit and lean against the pillow. The mother and daughter, who were only 10 years apart in age, had tired expressions on their faces. Old Madame Li sat down and drank a glass of water. Her face was gloomy as she said to Madame Li, "Give second brother a call and ask how Junior is doing now. And those hooligans, tell second brother that they can either be given the death penalty or stay in prison for the rest of their lives. Our family only has this one and only child. If something were to happen to him, how would I explain it to Master? Chung Lan, you have to keep a close eye on her. You have to keep a close eye on her." As for second brother, when old Madame Xiao Li mentioned Li Ronghuan, a trace of haze appeared in her turbid eyes. "Old Master believes it, but I don't. Second brother, that was Li Ronghuan." Old Madame Xiao Li, who had forced the first wife to death and replaced her, would never believe that the first wife had left behind a child. Li Ronghuan came back too coincidentally. He didn't seem to have any estrangement with her, his stepmother. The more it was like this, the more uncertain old Madame Xiao Li was. She didn't believe it, and neither did Madame Li. Hearing this, Madame Li nodded. "I know even if you don't say it. Now we only have June in our family. Nothing can happen to him." Chapter 5260. Li Jun is not the only grandson in the Li family. However, in the eyes of old Lady Li and Mrs. Li, except for Li Jun, the others are not members of the Li family. Old Madame Xiao Li had spent half of her life to hold the entire Li family in her hands, causing all the children of the first wife to be despised by old Master Li. How could she allow herself to lose to the child left behind by the first wife? "Go and see old Master. The doctor said that he woke up last night and may wake up today. Go and see him. Don't be taken advantage of by outsiders." Old Lady Li is relieved to leave the matter to her daughter. Thinking of Old Man Li, who is still lying in the intensive care unit, Old Lady Li still has a lingering fear in her heart when she thinks of what happened 2 days ago. "You just have a rest. I know. I told you that as long as Dad wakes up, I will go there immediately." Mrs. Li, who knows what is going on, doesn't need Old Lady Li's advice at all. She's also on guard against outsiders. Li Jinyan's biological father, second Uncle Li Ronghuan, and Li Jinyan himself are all outsiders mentioned by Old Lady Li. The Li family has not been peaceful in the past half year. First, the subordinates who rely on Old Man Li to get promoted fall one after another. First, there are problems in the collateral branch, but Old Man Li doesn't take it seriously at first. The Li family is like a big tree. The tree is big and the branches are lush. Even if some small branches have problems, it will not affect the main trunk. In addition, his body is not as good as before. Old Man Li is also afraid that he will die if he is not careful. Therefore, he doesn't control the following things as before. He will deal with the small problems when there are some problems. He will leave the worrying things to Li Ronghuan or the direct descendants below. Unexpectedly, he has not taken care of it for half a year, but there are more and more things. Until 2 days ago, even the 2 subordinates he promoted have problems and were invited to tea by the commission for discipline inspection. There's no news so far. There are too many problems in the Li family. As Old Man Li gets farther and farther away from the center of power, the things that used to be tightly covered up are now dug out little by little. A journey of 1,000 miles would be ruined by an ant's nest. What should come will come. Old Man Li's first call was to Li Ronghuan. Li Ronghuan was on her way to the airport and told Old Man Li another piece of bad news. Li Jun, the son of Li Chuhai and the darling of old Lady Li Xiaoli, had a fight with a local ruffian. His head was cut open and he was now in the hospital. Li Ronghuan went to High Province as soon as she received the news. High Province was Old Man Li's most powerful territory. He sent Li Jun to High Province because he thought that Li Jun would be the crown prince there and no one would dare to provoke him. No matter how much he thought about it, he didn't expect that those ruffians and hooligans wouldn't buy it. They didn't know that Li Jun was from the capital, so they didn't find him pleasing to the eye. After a few words of disagreement, these ruffians and hooligans, who could do whatever they wanted in High Province, started fighting with Li Jun. Li Jun had 3 bodyguards around him, but they were outnumbered. One of the ruffians picked up a beer bottle and smashed it on Li Jun's head. The back of Li Jun's head was bleeding, and he fainted immediately. Now was a big deal. The people in High Province who protected Li Jun didn't dare to contact Old Man Li. They only dared to contact Li Ronghuan, the second master, who sent Li Jun to High Province. Li Ronghuan, who went to the airport empty-handed with only his documents, hurriedly told Old Man Li about Li Jun's injury. His tone was a little exaggerated, and he almost said that Li Jun died on the spot. Chapter 52-61. At that time, Old Man Li was furious because of the problem of the direct descendant. When he received Li Ronghuan's call and learned that Li Jun had an accident, he only felt that all the blood in his body rushed to his brain. Before he could react, he didn't know what happened next. Fortunately, the family doctor of the Li family lived in the Li family for nearly half a year. Old Man Li was immediately rescued when he fainted. Old Man Li was lucky. He had a strong desire to survive, so he survived this time. The deputy chief of staff Du, who locked Du Jiai at home and asked the guards to keep an eye on her, rushed to the hospital angrily. Before he arrived at the hospital, he received the news that Old Man Li had woken up. Mrs. Li asked people to keep an eye on Old Man Li in the ICU. The deputy chief of staff Du, who didn't have time to go to the hospital, also gave orders secretly. The deputy chief of staff, Du, suppressed his anger and went to the ICU to see his father-in-law first. Although he didn't help the Li family, Old Man Li was his father-in-law after all. How could he avoid going to the hospital to avoid suspicion? It was not good to hear. Old Man Li, who had a stroke for the second time, was not as lucky as the first time. Before, he was paralyzed on one side. This time, the doctor said to the deputy chief of staff, Du, regretfully, "The old man is lucky to be saved from the second stroke. Please take it easy." Old Man Li's life was saved, but his whole body was paralyzed. He couldn't even speak clearly. It was much more serious than the first time when he was paralyzed on one side. Old Madame Xiao Li's knees went weak, and she fell onto Madame Li's body. There was another round of chaos. Madame Li had to take care of old Madame Xiao Li, so the deputy chief of staff Du looked at old Master Li, who had just woken up. Old Man Li, who had dominated the world all his life, had a tube inserted into his body. His hair was white, and he was lying motionless. Other than his eyeballs, which could still move slightly, his whole body was so weak that he was no longer as awe-inspiring as he used to be. He was on the verge of death, and even his life had an aura of decay. The deputy chief of staff, Du, didn't feel good either. He sat on a small round stool that the guards had brought over. The deputy chief of staff, Du, said softly, "Dad, have a good rest. Don't worry about what's happening outside." Old Man Li rolled his gray eyes. Wearing a breathing mask, he kept making vague sounds in his throat. He had lost the ability to speak. It was as if something was stuck in his throat. Even the sounds he made had to be carefully listened to. After a while, the deputy chief of staff, Du, finally understood what was being said. Handsome. It turned out to be Li Chuhai's son. Li Jun. Li Chuhai had grown up overseas. When Li Chuhai returned to the country to protect Li Jun, he even created a fake Li Jun and hid it from everyone. The real Li Jun came back. As his uncle, he had only seen him once. Rong Huan is with Jun. Don't worry. I'll call Rong Huan later to ask about the situation. If Jun is fine, I'll ask him to come back to the capital to accompany you. Although Old Man Li was paralyzed and couldn't speak, his hearing wasn't damaged, and his brain wasn't muddled. Hearing this, He nodded and then shook his head hard. He was a little anxious, as if something was stuck in his throat. This time, the deputy chief of staff didn't understand what he wanted to say. Don't you want Junior to come back? If you want him to come back, you nod. If you don't want him to come back, you shake your head. Old Manly nodded. Okay, I'll contact Rong Huan immediately after I go out. As long as Junior is fine, I'll come back to the capital immediately. As soon as the deputy chief of staff finished speaking, Old Man Lee shook his head again. This time, the deputy chief of staff really didn't understand what he meant. Chapter 5262. The deputy chief of staff who did not know what Old Manly wanted to say, only sat for a short while before the doctor did not allow the patient's family to visit him again. Although Old Manly was awake, he was very weak. It was not suitable for him to meet guests for a long time, so he should not tire himself out. Old Manly did not expect the deputy chief of staff to wake up so early. He was so anxious that he breathed heavily, and white smoke came out of his breathing mask. When the doctor saw this, he was so shocked that he immediately said to Old Manly, "Please calm down. You are still in a critical period. You must not be agitated again." Old Manly, who was panting heavily, had been stubborn all his life. How could he listen to the doctor? He knew his own body very well. He did not have much time left. While he was still sober, he had to make the best use of the time he had to hand over some things. Lon. His throat was filled with thick phlegm as he mumbled. The more agitated he was, the more frightened the doctor was. The doctor, who was afraid that there would be a problem, immediately put in a sedative and sleep-inducing agent into the drip. However, Old Manly, who had been very weak for a while, could not resist the effects of the drug. He struggled for a while before he finally closed his eyes and fell asleep. The deputy chief of staff who did not leave, saw that the doctors and nurses were sweating profusely. He said very apologetically, "I'm sorry, Professor Lee. You have to worry about my father-in-law." Last time, when Old Manly had a stroke and was hospitalized, it was also Professor Lee who saved him. It was the same this time. Hearing this, Professor Lee wiped the sweat on his forehead and sighed. Deputy Chief of Staff, the old man has a bad temper. He likes to do everything by himself. He survived 2 strokes in a row. Even if he has good fortune, he can't withstand the old man's torment. As doctors, we can only do our best. However, whether the patient can be well or not sometimes depends on the patient's cooperation. You have to take care of the things outside. The old man's body really can't be tormented anymore. If he continued to torment himself, he was afraid that he would not have much time left. The doctor did not say this out loud. The deputy chief of staff also knew his father-in-law's temper. He was stubborn, and a man of his word. Even when he was sick, he was still a troublesome patient. He smiled bitterly and said, "All right, we will definitely cooperate with your arrangements. We will definitely try to persuade the old master." They would try their best to persuade him as much as possible. The more they tried to persuade him, the angrier his father-in-law would be. With such a temper, no one could do anything about it. Old Man Lee had already fallen asleep. Professor Lee ordered the doctors and nurses on duty to keep an eye on him. Then he brought the deputy chief of staff out. As he walked, he talked about Old Man Lee's current situation. It's not optimistic. You have to be mentally prepared. If there's anything, you have to prepare early. These words were said very clearly. When the deputy chief of staff saw Old Man Lee's complexion just now, he already had a faint feeling in his heart. Now that the doctor had said it clearly, the deputy chief of staff was not very surprised. The deputy chief of staff who frowned, thought for a while, and asked Professor Lee, "Have you told my wife anything?" "Not yet, but we'll talk later." Deputy chief of staff should have an idea of the old man's situation just now. We will do our best. As a person in a high position, he had to arrange more things than ordinary people. It was better to let him know early in order to avoid any problems when the time came. After confirming that Old Man Lee had only fainted and that his body was not seriously injured, Madam Lee hurried to the intensive care unit to visit Old Man Lee. In the middle of the corridor, she bumped into Professor Lee, who was standing there with a serious expression on his face. She did not know what to say to her husband. Chapter 52-63. Inexplicably, Mrs. Lee felt a chill in her heart. She couldn't help but shudder and quicken her pace. Changlan, the deputy chief of staff, saw his wife in advance and greeted her lightly. She had to be careful outside. No matter how bad their relationship was, she couldn't make a fool of herself outside. Mrs. Lee also cared about her reputation. She wouldn't throw a tantrum outside and let others see her as a joke. "Professor Lee, how is my father? Is he completely out of danger?" Mrs. Lee asked anxiously as she approached. While asking, she saw Professor Lee's serious face. Mrs. Lee felt that the cold autumn wind outside was blowing into her bones. Old man Lee was still in charge of the Lee family. The cause of his brother Lee Chuhai's death hadn't been found out. The old man couldn't fall. "It's not optimistic. I just told the deputy chief of staff that the family should be prepared in advance. If there is anything that needs to be done, do it in advance." Mrs. Lee, who was about to faint, swayed. The deputy chief of staff hurriedly held her and whispered, "Father-in-law is old. You have to be prepared." His father-in-law was probably the only person who could survive 2 strokes. Mrs. Lee didn't like to hear this. She shook off her husband's hand and said angrily, "What do I have to be prepared for? You can't wait for my father to leave, can't you?" They were still outside and in front of outsiders. Everyone could tell that there was something wrong between the couple. Professor Lee didn't stay any longer. He made an excuse and left. Before leaving, he said, "The hospital likes quiet. You could discuss it at home." The deputy chief of staff's face didn't darken until Professor Lee was far away. "Don't be silly outside. Father-in-law is lucky that he survived 2 strokes in a row. Do you think he could be the same as before? You know what to do. Don't be angry at him." Seeing that his wife was about to get angry again, the deputy chief of staff took a deep breath and controlled his temper. He said patiently, "Father-in-law wants Ronghuan to take June back to the capital. You contact Ronghuan and see how June is doing. If it doesn't affect his discharge, he should return to the capital as soon as possible. Also, I've talked to Juner. A few gangsters will be dealt with. Ronghuan knows. Don't get involved." Madame Lee, who had a belly full of anger, heard her husband specially greet her nephew, and her heart finally felt a little better. She was a person who could only go with the flow. Seeing her husband take the initiative to lower his head, the sharpness on her face lessened a lot. "Did my father say anything just now?" she asked coldly. "He only said that he wanted June, to come back. Nothing else. He didn't know what he meant by that." Li Ronghua knew that old man Li woke up half an hour later. He had been busy with Li Jun's affairs. Li Jun, who was lying in bed, found his phone for him. Only then did he know that old man Li had woken up. Receiving Mrs. Li's call, Li Ronghuan, who is also in the hospital, smiles coldly. She is so lucky. She has lived for so long and failed twice. She is indeed so lucky. After asking the doctor, she learned that Li Jun could be discharged from the hospital, but it was better not to take a plane. Li Ronghuan, who also wanted to go back to the capital, directly asked High Province to prepare a luxury business car. She arranged for 2 doctors to accompany her to drive back to the capital. The distance from High Province to the capital was not ordinary. The distance was nearly 3,000 kilometers. They planned to rush back to the capital in 2 days and 2 nights. The next day, Li Jun lay in the car and fell asleep. Li Ronghuan received a call from an unknown number. Li Ronghuan glanced at Li Jun, who had closed his eyes and leaned a little to the side lazily. She didn't say anything and just listened to what was said on the other side. Chapter 52-64. The chauffeurs arranged by Li Ronghuan all had 10 years of driving experience. They drove steadily and quickly. It was very comfortable to sit in the car. The sun shone in through the window, making people feel sleepy. Li Jun, who had his eyes closed, looked up slightly and glanced at Li Ronghuan, who was on the phone. A cold light flashed through his eyes. This second uncle of his was a little interesting. Li Ronghuan's phone call was a little long, but he was in a good mood after hanging up. He even told the chauffeur to drive safely in case of an accident. Li Jun's eyes were closed all the time. Except for getting out of the car to exercise and eat, he almost never opened his eyes. He didn't say much to Li Ronghuan either. He was like an invisible person. Sometimes, even the chauffeur forgot about him. Li Ronghuan didn't pay much attention to Li Jun. He wanted the Li family to collapse. As for Li Jun, he didn't want to make things difficult for him. During the 2-day drive, he even asked if Li Jun was feeling uncomfortable. Li Ronghuan received a mysterious call and was in a good mood. However, in the capital, Madame Li was in a terrible mood. She held the phone tightly and said to the deputy chief of staff, who was questioning her, "You never cared about your daughter's marriage. I took care of everything at home. Now that Jiai's marriage has been thwarted, you still have the face to question me?" That day, the deputy chief of staff, Du, came to the hospital to question about Du Jiai. In the end, he almost quarreled with Madame Li because he asked Li Ronghuan to send Li Jun back to the capital. Madame Li blamed her husband for letting Li Ronghuan escort Li Jun back to the capital alone. The deputy chief of staff, Du, thought that his wife was crazy and overthinking. No matter how much his second brother-in-law disagreed with the family, it was ridiculous for him to harm his nephew. In the end, he left in a huff. He was so angry that he forgot to ask about Du Jiai. When he got in the car and remembered why he came to the hospital, the deputy chief of staff, Du, called again. He had to rush back to the office and put the matter between Du Jiai and the Qin family aside for the time being. However, before the matter was resolved, Du Jiai was still locked up at home. Now that Du Jiai was at home, apart from being able to walk around normally, she could not step out of the house. However, this did not affect her contact with the outside world. When Mrs. Li received her daughter's call, she wanted to know why her husband came to the hospital angrily. When she called him, she was told that his phone was turned off. In addition, she was worried that Li Ronghuan would harm Li Jun, so she comforted Du Jiai and told her to rest at home for a few days. She then called Mrs. Qin to explain and put the matter aside for the time being. The next day, the deputy chief of staff, Du, immediately called Mrs. Li. As soon as he told her about it, Mrs. Li exploded as if she had stepped on a firecracker. "Old Du, touch your conscience and tell me, what have I, Li Chenglong, done to you for this family? Jiai likes Qin Xiu, and Qin Xiu is indeed a good son-in-law. Am I wrong to fight for my daughter's lifelong happiness? You said that Jiai is sticking to him, but how is she sticking to him? Get your facts straight. Mrs. Qin is the one who likes Jiai, and she's been contacting Jiai all this time. That's why I agreed. Even if my daughter can't get married, I won't let her stick to him. The deputy chief of staff do believe that, but why don't you ask your good daughter and see if she's throwing herself at him?" After saying that, the deputy chief of staff ended the call. Thinking about what happened early in the morning yesterday, he was so angry that he wanted to smash his phone. Chapter 5265. Mrs. Li didn't ask Du Jiai. Old man Li woke up again. Including today, old man Li woke up twice. After the deputy chief of staff, Du, left yesterday, old man Li woke up again that night. This time, the mother and daughter understood what he wanted to say. Old man Li didn't feel at ease leaving Li Jun in Li Ronghuan's hands. Why? Old man Li had thoughts in his heart, but unfortunately, he couldn't express them properly. Mrs. Li promised to send Li Jun abroad as soon as he returned to the capital. Old man Li's face showed a trace of relief. The next day, old man Li woke up for the third time. When he woke up, his spirit was obviously better than before. Although it was difficult for him to speak, he had been awake for more than an hour. It was already 3 o'clock in the morning when Li Ronghuan took Li Jun to the capital. The car drove directly to the hospital and didn't go back to the Li family. Mrs. Li received a call from Li Ronghuan at about 2:30 in the morning. She told her that she had arrived in the capital safely and went directly to the hospital to visit old man Li. Mrs. Li, who had been nervous for 2 days, was finally relieved. The old Mrs. Li heard her daughter talking on the phone in the middle of the night. She listened carefully and learned that Li Jun had returned safely. She put her hands together and said, "Amit Ba, it's good to hear that you have arrived safely. When old master gets better, quickly send June abroad and take away all the valuables at home. Don't come back if you have nothing to do. Mrs. Lee said with lingering fear. This matter, we have to listen to old master's arrangement. We can't let June do whatever he wants. Mrs. Lee poured a cup of warm water and handed it to her. Mrs. Lee took the cup to moisten her throat and eyes and said, Old master must have noticed something, so he thought of sending June out. I still remember the look in Li Ronghuan's eyes when he left home. He didn't have the kindness to go home to help us, let alone take care of June. Old master knew it in his heart. In the past, old master could still control him. Now that he has fallen, he knows that he can't control him, so he hurriedly sent June abroad. After decades of husband and wife, Mrs. Lee knew old man Lee very well. After understanding old man Lee's meaning, the mother and daughter were even more worried that Li Ronghuan would harm Li Jun on the way. Now that she arrived in the capital safely and rushed to the hospital directly, old Madam Li felt that Li Ronghuan, her stepson, had finally done something that made her feel comfortable. Madam Li poured herself a glass of wine to soothe her throat before saying, Dad must have made arrangements in his heart. He just didn't expect himself to collapse so suddenly. There are a lot of things that you and I don't know. We can only see if June knows a little about it. When June is June's family, June's to ask June as well. Dad always has his own plans. Li Ronghuan went out for more than 10 years and suddenly came back. How could Dad trust him completely? Dad asked Li Ronghuan to investigate Chu Hai's matter and then arrange for June to go to High Province. Mom, don't forget, Chu Hai's old army was in High Province back then. Do you think it's possible that Dad also asked June to investigate? Old Madam Lee's eyelids twitched fiercely. This is like old master's style of doing things. That's most likely the case. The mother and daughter were waiting for Li Ronghuan to come over. They talked in the ward and talked about the matter thoroughly. They agreed that old man Li must have a deep meaning for Li Jun to go to High Province. And it was true. Li Jun rushed to the hospital. Mrs. Li sent Li Ronghuan away, and he told Mrs. Li why he went to High Province. Second uncle is not my father's brother, who would be at ease if he went to investigate. I suggested it first, and then Grandpa arranged it. Chapter 52-66. Li Jun, who was born and raised abroad, did not have much affection for the Li family. Before he returned to China, he had never met Old Man Li and Old Madam Li. Oh no, it should be said that Old Man Li and Old Madam Li had never met Li Jun. Li Jun had seen them through photos. Old Man Li had always said that his youngest son, Li Chu Hai, was like him. In the final analysis, they were both cold-blooded. In their eyes, blood ties were dispensable. For their own interests, they could even raise a butcher's knife and kill their relatives. Back then, Old Master Li had gone through the same thing. Old Master Li's parents had also gone through the same thing. If Li Chu Hai had not gone abroad, he might have also dealt with his two stepbrothers. Li Jun had inherited the cold temperament of the Li family. He had returned to the country not for his grandparents, whom he had no feelings for, but to investigate the death of his father, Li Chu Hai. Otherwise, he would have stayed in Melbourne for the rest of his life, playing whatever he liked. In the face of Old Man Li's inquiry, Li Jun did not hide anything. He told Old Madam Li what Old Man Li said. Old Madam Li saw that her grandson's head was still tied with a white bandage. She was so distressed that her eyes turned red. She wanted to hug and love him. Li Jun pretended not to see it. He did not ask why a normal person was hospitalized. He sat down and asked why they were in a hurry to let him go back to Beijing. Old Man Li had a stroke. Li Jun did not take it to heart. He was just investigating something and was hit in the head. He was in a bad mood all the way back to Beijing. Old Madam Li was worried that Li Ronghuan would do something, so she talked about business first. She had always been a person who could distinguish between the important and the important. In the face of Old Madam Li's question, Li Jun said lightly, Grandpa doesn't believe second uncle. As for me, I don't believe second uncle either. I believe that you and Aunt don't believe it. Second uncle is a bit interesting. He does things well and paints beautifully. You can help me ask second uncle for a few more paintings. I will keep them and take them out when I am short of money. Old Madam Lee agreed to Li Jun's requests. He nodded and agreed to everything. It was just a few paintings. It was not a big problem. The most important thing now was to arrange for Li Jun to leave the country as soon as possible. In the ward, old Madam Xiao Li told Li Jun about old Master Li's intention. Outside, Madam Li asked Li Ronghuan how the matter in High Province was handled. According to her, those gangsters who hurt Li Jun would not have a good time and would all be arrested. Li Ronghuan was addicted to smoking, and doctors were forbidden in the capital. He took out a cigarette from his pocket and sniffed it. Then he answered with a smile, "Deal with it according to the law. Do what you need to do." Of course, if brother-in-law has any good ideas to increase the severity of these people's punishment, I have no objections. Old Madam Li climbed into her brother-in-law's bed at the age of 15. Although Madam Li was a mistress, she was 10 years older than Li Ronghuan. Li Chuai was 4 years younger than Li Ronghuan. Cold wind poured in through the open window in the corridor. Mrs. Li stepped aside in thin clothes and looked at Li Ronghuan coldly. He clearly knew that she was wearing thin clothes, yet he still opened the window. She was really not presentable, so he resorted to such underhanded means. "Dad asked you to deal with this matter because Dad believes that you can do it well. Jun is Dad's only grandson and will inherit the Li family in the future. You are Jun's uncle. As an elder, you can't even protect your own nephew. Aren't you afraid of being laughed at?" Chapter 5267. Madam Li said coldly. She was annoyed by Li Ronghuan's indifference. Li Ronghuan didn't care about Jun, even though Dad was still around. When Dad passed away, Li Ronghuan wouldn't be able to help Jun. Li Ronghuan was silent for a while before he sneered. Madam Li's face darkened when she heard his laughter. "What are you laughing at? What am I laughing at?" Li Ronghuan looked up. His eyes were full of sarcasm. "Li Jun is the only grandson of the old man. Li Qinglan, you're not so old that you are confused. Our Jinyan is the eldest grandson of the Li family. You have forgotten all about him." Madam Li was angry at first, but she sneered at the end. "Li Jinyan? He is not a descendant of the Li family. He went to the Fu family a long time ago. Dad used to remember that he was the eldest grandson of the Li family. He even told Mom that he had to leave a large share of the Li family's things for the eldest grandson and not move everything to his grandson's family. Dad does miss his eldest grandson, but this eldest grandson of the Li family has never thought of himself as a member of the Li family. He has always been loyal to the Fu family. He is a traitor. How can he be the eldest grandson of the Li family? If he could change his surname, he would have changed his surname to Fu. Dad said long ago that there will be no Li Jinyan in the Li family in the future." Li Ronghuan's face darkened. It was not because old man Li did not recognize Li Jinyan, but because he was unhappy with Madam Li Jinyan's attitude. If he could change his surname to Fu, Li Ronghuan would be happy. Unfortunately, he couldn't. It was good that the Li family didn't have Li Jinyan in the future. It was a rotten place. What was there to care about? The Li family would be happy to stay clean. Only these dirty and smelly people in front of him treated the Li family as a treasure. That made sense. He had spent so much effort to obtain it, so he naturally treated the Li family as a treasure. It was a pity that there were not many good days left. It was good for Li Jinyan to leave. He could stay in the army and be clean. Li Ronghuan, who was not happy with Mrs. Li's attitude, was about to raise the corner of her mouth when she heard Mrs. Li say with a faint smile, "You haven't been home for more than 10 years. I can understand that you don't know what happened at home. Since you and I are siblings, I'll remind you not to mention Li Jinyan in front of Dad. Dad doesn't like to hear that." Li Ronghuan's voice did not hide her gloating. Li Ronghuan looked at her deeply and smiled deeply. "Is that so? Thank you for reminding me. Sister and brother? Was she even worthy?" Madam Li, who still thought that she had won this round, smiled even more deeply. "You're welcome. You just have to help Junior well. Only then will Dad be happy. All right, it's getting late. Go home and rest." Dad always wanted to see Junior, so Junior stayed in the hospital. From now on, She had to separate Li Ronghuan from Jun in case something went wrong. Li Ronghuan stretched and looked at Li Chenglan, who was pretending to be his sister, in front of her. After a while, she said slowly, "Then I'll go to the hotel next door to pass the night. Call me if Dad wakes up. I have good news to tell Dad." "Okay, you can go." Mrs. Li nodded. She didn't take Li Ronghuan's words to heart. She had no intention of letting Li Ronghuan see old man Li. Li Ronghuan, who had walked a few steps with his hands in his pockets, suddenly turned around. Mrs. Li didn't expect him to suddenly turn around. She didn't have time to hide the cold and contemptuous expression on her face, and Li Ronghuan happened to see it. Chapter 52-68. Mrs. Li, who was caught red-handed, immediately turned cold. "What else do you want?" "Nothing. I just want you to tell Dad in advance that there's a result of the investigation he asked me to do." Li Ronghuan smiled and admired Mrs. Li's twisted expression. "When Dad wakes up, I should be able to receive the news immediately." He wanted to see Mrs. Li make a fool of herself. Mrs. Li knew that, but she couldn't do anything about it. There was an outcome to the matter that Dad asked him to do. Did that mean that he knew who Chu Hai's murderer was? "Don't worry. As soon as Dad wakes up, I'll call you immediately," Mrs. Li said coldly, trying to calm her expression. She didn't want Li Ronghuan to see her lose her composure. Li Ronghuan raised his eyebrows and smiled at her. Then, he walked away in a relaxed manner. Li Ronghuan was in a good mood when he saw Li Chenglan trying to hold back her anger. How dare a mistress act like an older sister in front of him? Did she think she was so shameless? Mrs. Li's expression changed several times. In the end, she clenched her cheeks and glared at the leaving figure before returning to the ward. Li Ronghuan was playing with her just now. He didn't hide it at all. He told her very clearly that he was playing with her and wanted to see her make a fool of herself. Mrs. Li, who was humiliated for the first time, stood for a long time before she calmed down. Then, she felt the cold wind blow on her face before she returned to the ward. At around 7:30 in the morning, Li Ronghuan rushed to the hospital and saw old man Li in the intensive care unit. He looked much better than he did the next day. Faced with old master Li's decaying aura, Li Ronghuan felt a twisted sense of satisfaction. Back then, his mother had passed away in pain. Now, it was time for the biggest culprit to have a taste of his mother's pain. Li Ronghuan stood beside the bed and glanced at the equipment that kept old man Li alive. Then, he bent down and sighed. "Dad, you're really good at torturing yourself. It wasn't easy for you to walk, stand, and eat, but now you're hospitalized. Can you still talk? Can you still hear?" "Li Ronghuan, what are you thinking? Do you want to make Dad angry?" Madame Li scolded her in front of the doctors and nurses. "If you say anything else, get out of here." Old Madame Li wiped the corners of her eyes and said in a trembling voice, "Ronghuan, I beg you. If you feel uncomfortable in your heart, just come at me. Don't anger Master anymore, okay?" The doctors and nurses, who were used to dealing with people but did not know the truth, looked at Li Ronghuan differently. Another unfilial son. Old man Li, who couldn't move but was clear-headed, couldn't do anything about it even if he wanted to. He snorted and glanced to the side, then looked at Madame Li. He wanted Madame Li to ask the doctor and nurse to leave. What happened next was related to Li Chu Hai, so Mrs. Li didn't want the doctors and nurses to know. After they finished their work, she politely asked them to leave and asked the people around old man Li to guard at the door in case they were eavesdropped. When there were no outsiders around, old man Li spat out a few words. "Talk, talk, talk." Li Ronghuan didn't speak immediately. He frowned and looked at the door. "There should be a doctor here. If there's anything wrong, he can be saved immediately." "Li Ronghuan, you're doing this on purpose." Madame Li's face darkened. She didn't have much patience. "If you have something to say, say it. If not, don't disturb Dad's rest." Chapter 52-69. Old Madame Shaoli also thought that Li Ronghuan was doing this on purpose. "Yes, Ronghuan, hurry up and say it. Have you investigated your younger brother's matter? Hurry up and tell little mother, so that old master can be happy." Old Madame Xiao Li, who had to wipe the corners of her eyes at least 3 times, begged. Anyone who saw this would feel that this old woman was very pitiful, and Li Ronghuan was a bad person. I will say it, but I'm worried that father won't be able to accept it and will have problems with his body. Li Ronghuan whetted everyone's appetite, including old man Li, who was lying down and heard everything clearly. Say. Old man Li, who had a lot to say but couldn't say it, still wanted to use his old prestige to order Li Ronghuan. Unfortunately, he could only lie down now, a paralyzed patient who couldn't even speak clearly. Li Ronghuan looked at old man Li and then looked at the mistress who killed his mother. His eyes flashed with hostility as he spoke reluctantly. Father, then you have to hold on. Don't let yourself be angry anymore. I will say it, just listen carefully. He looked at old Madame Xiao Li again and pouted at Li Jun. You are young, support her well. Little mother? Bah! The older he was, the thicker his face. Hurry up and say it. Ronghuan, little mother is begging you. While old master was still awake, and Jun was also here, hurry up and say it. Old Madame Xiao Li was a little anxious. I found some things. The female soldier who was killed that year gave birth to a daughter after returning. The daughter was quite capable and was even admitted to the military academy. The subordinates received orders to reinvestigate the death of the female soldier that year. It was the female soldier's daughter who contacted the higher-ups through her own efforts and attracted the attention of the higher-ups. So the order was given to reinvestigate the death of the female soldier. Old man Li's eyes widened when he spoke. The dead female soldier actually had a daughter. He had investigated for so long and still couldn't find out. How did Li Ronghuan find out? The matter has been investigated for so many years. I think that someone must want to reverse the case. And the person who wants to reverse the case is naturally the family around her. It took more than 10 years for the case to be overturned. I think maybe the female soldier actually has a son and a daughter. Now that her son and daughter are successful, she wants to overturn the case. Li Ronghuan didn't lie to old man Li. That was what he thought before the investigation. The justice was clear and the retribution was not pleasant. Maybe the children of the victims wanted to take revenge. With this investigation, he really found out the truth. I found the female soldiers' former comrades. They were all tight-lipped, so I couldn't get anything out of them. The more I couldn't get anything out of them, the more suspicious I became. In the end, I found one of them. After spending some money and enticing him, it was confirmed that the female soldier did have a daughter who was admitted to the military academy. She even got in contact with the female soldier's former comrades. When old Madame Xiao Li heard this, sorrow welled up in her heart. So, it was this bitch's son who took my son's life, right? It was that bastard who killed my son, wasn't it? His voice was obviously so old, but it was gloomy and made people feel very uncomfortable. It was like water that flowed in the gutter all year round. Just a little bit of it would make people feel cold all over. Old man Li's breathing was so rapid that there was a thick white fog on his breathing mask. Continue speaking. Tell him everything that you found out. The more anxious they were, the slower Li Ronghuan was. Then, he glanced at the gloomy Madame Li. Madame Li panicked for no reason. Why are you looking at me? What else? Did you find out who the female soldier's son is? Li Ronghuan's eyes darkened. The revenge hidden in his eyes could no longer be hidden. Of course I found out. This person is also related to you. Chapter 5270. Madame Li could see Li Ronghuan's evil intentions, but she didn't have time to expose his evil intentions. How dare he say that the bastard had something to do with her? How dare he? Madame Li's face darkened. What does it have to do with me? Don't keep me in suspense. Tell me. Old man Li looked at her daughter. She didn't believe that her daughter had anything to do with the bastard of the female soldier. She was also afraid that Li Ronghuan was deliberately instigating her in front of old man Li. She covered her chest and cried sadly. Ronghuan, can you give me a quick death? I beg you, don't hide it anymore, okay? Tell... Old man Li, who was lying on the bed, was unusually red. It wasn't because of his good health. but because he was angry. How could he not know that Li Ronghuan was deliberately dragging it out? Li Jun, who had been silent all this time, finally opened his mouth. Like a venomous snake waking up in winter, he spat out his tongue and revealed his venomous fangs. Second uncle, if you have something to say, just say it. There's no point in hiding it so slowly. Young man, you're so impatient. Fine, I won't hide it anymore. You should prepare yourself. Li Ronghuan, who had kept her in suspense, looked deeply at Madame Li's face. Seeing the panic in her eyes, his smile deepened. Scared? Yes, scared is right. Madame Li saw a strange light flash in his eyes. Instantly, the panic in her heart grew. Even her fingers were trembling secretly. Could it be that she really knew the murderer who killed her brother? Was that possible? The female soldier's daughter's surname is Yi. She was fostered in Uncle Yi Jifan's house since she was young. Yi Jifan has a daughter named Yi Ying. As if thunder had exploded, Madame Li's body shook violently. She was so shocked that she blurted out, "Impossible! Impossible! Impossible! Nothing is impossible. I've investigated it thoroughly." Yi Ying and Yi Qian were cousins. They didn't get along well since they were young. Speaking of which, it's fate. It's all thanks to you that Yi Qian was able to meet you. If it wasn't for the deputy chief of staff, who got Yi Ying into the army, Yi Qian probably wouldn't have had the chance to meet you. This time, Li Ronghuan called Madame Li's sister. Her malice was so deep that Madame Li's face turned pale. Yi Qian is quite capable. He got into the military academy and found out that his mother's cause of death was suspicious. He investigated the matter and finally alerted the higher-ups. In the end, the investigation led to Li Chuhai. My ability is limited, so I can't find out much. I only know that Li Chuhai was killed at sea because he killed a female soldier. Big sister, oh big sister, the main reason for Chuhai's death is because of you. If you hadn't provoked Yi Qian to come to the capital first and let the two sisters meet, and if Yi Qian hadn't targeted the Li family, Chuhai wouldn't have been shot more than 10 times. He wouldn't have ended up with his intestines and internal organs all over the ground. Speaking of which, big sister, it's you who sent Chuhai to his death. Sigh, your own sister killed your own brother. What is this? Chuhai died so tragically. He didn't even know that he was killed by his own sister. Old Madame Xiao Li didn't even know what Li Ronghuan said after that. She just collapsed. Old Man Li, who was lying on the ground, opened his mouth wide. A bubbling sound came from his throat. His cloudy eyes bulged wider and wider. Finally, the device that had been monitoring his body emitted a shrill alarm. The doctor on duty heard the alarm and rushed over in a panic. The nurse was busy saving Old Man Li, who had fainted again. The doctor was busy saving old Madame Xiao Li. His heartbeat was getting slower and slower. It was obvious from his expression that he had fainted from anger. Li Ronghuan looked coldly at the chaotic ward. His suppressed heart was getting better and better. If it weren't for his self-control, he would have laughed out loud. When he saw the heartbeat on the device change from an undulating line to a straight line, Li Ronghuan lowered his head and his shoulders shook violently. Chapter 5271. Li Ronghuan was overjoyed. He was so happy that tears streamed down his face. He was so happy that he cried and laughed, completely forgetting that he was still in the hospital. Madame Li, on the other hand, was not. When she saw that the undulations had become a straight line, she did not even care about old Madame Li, who had fainted. She stood by the bed, so panicked that her lips trembled. His heart had stopped. His heart had stopped. Old Master's heart had stopped. Hurry up and save him. Hurry up. If anything happens to my father, none of you will have an easy time. She screamed at the top of her lungs. She was so panicked that she stumbled to the end of the bed and stared at old man Li, who was lying motionless on the bed. Dad, don't scare me, don't scare me, don't scare me. Old Man Li had always been Madame Li's pillar of support. With old Man Li and the Li family, it meant that the Li family had a backbone that could support the Li family and protect Madame Li. Madame Li, who had always been under the protection of the Li family, knew very well what would happen if old Man Li fell. Li Jun had not been protected yet, but the person in power had fallen. Then, the Li family would fall apart. Madame Li, whose legs had turned to jelly, could only stand properly by leaning against the end of the bed. She kept saying that she wanted the doctor to save him quickly, that she was calling for Old Man Li, and that she did not know about Yi Qian's background. She said a lot of things, but no one looked at her in detail. The doctor was still trying his best to save him. The nurses were also helping by the side. Old Madame Li was carried to the side to lie down. There was also a nurse and a doctor taking care of her. As for Li Ronghuan, he was very happy. Happy, he was really happy. He was really happy. He had been thinking about how to take revenge. He had been thinking about it, but he had not been able to think of a good way. He had not been able to wait for the opportunity to return home and take revenge. The old man was a ruthless character. Although he looked old, it was not a problem for him to casually kill 1 or 2 people. As long as he did not fall, he would steer the big ship of the Li family well and would not let the Li family capsize easily. He had been waiting for the day when he could return to China. He had spent nearly 10 years building a good relationship with Li Chuhai and several years persuading Li Chuhai to return to China. He wanted Li Chuhai, this bomb, to destroy the foundation of the Li family first. It would be best if something big happened and let the country know what Li Chuhai had done abroad. He had even done enough homework to let the country keep an eye on Li Chuhai and then pry into the Li family. Unexpectedly, Li Chuhai ran into the blade himself and lost his life. What happened next was unexpectedly smooth. The old man fell, and he returned to the country smoothly. But now, ha ha, this is really worthy of celebration. Worthy of celebration. This is worthy of celebration. This is worthy of celebration. This is worthy of celebration. This old man who had been awe-inspiring his whole life was angered to death. Ever since he answered the phone, he had been thinking about how to tell the old man who had suffered a stroke again. He had been excitedly thinking about it all the way. The more he thought about it, the more excited he became. He could not wait to rush to the hospital and tell the old man the good news who had been waiting for the results of the investigation. He believed that the old man would be excited after hearing it, because he finally knew why Li Chuhai died and who killed him. Li Chengluan? If she had not contacted Yi Jifan's family, he would not have been able to find out that the daughter of the female soldier, Yi Qian, had met her. Thanks to Li Chengluan's actions back then, his good news became more exciting and perfect. Wiping away the tears in his eyes, he heard the doctor say regretfully, "I'm sorry, Mr. Li. We tried our best. Please restrain your grief." Restrain your grief? No. It should be a happy holiday. Chapter 52-72. Li Ronghuan, who didn't look sad at all, bowed deeply. He was afraid that the smile on his face would be seen by the doctors and nurses, so he had to hide it well. "Thank you for your hard work. Thank you. He bowed and thanked them sincerely. As medical staff, they did work hard. In order to save the old man, they were all sweating profusely. It was really hard. The doctors and nurses all knew the identity of Old Man Li. Although life and death were predestined, and they tried their best, they were still worried that the Li family would blame them for not doing their best. Seeing that Li Ronghuan was so generous and even bowed to apologize to them, the doctors were relieved. They were very sad that they didn't succeed in saving the patient, but they also needed the understanding of the patient's family. It was not that they didn't try their best, but that they really tried their best, but there was really no other way. But Mrs. Li didn't. She announced that Old Man Li's heart had stopped. Mrs. Li was stunned at first, and then she rushed to Old Man Li's side, crying sadly with red eyes. Old Man Li doted on his daughter and son more than the 2 sons born by his first wife. If there was a stepmother, there would be a stepfather. With Mrs. Li's means, Old Man Li, who had never cared about the family affairs, naturally favored all the children of his mistresses. He didn't like the 2 sons who killed his first wife. Mrs. Li's sadness was also real. The father and daughter had a good relationship, but suddenly they were separated. Although Professor Li had told her to be mentally prepared, she still couldn't accept it when it really happened. She lay on the bed and cried sadly, and Li Ronghuan bowed to thank the doctor. Before Li Ronghuan straightened up, Mrs. Li suddenly rushed to the doctor like crazy and slapped the sweating doctor in the face. She wanted to slap him again, but she was pushed aside by Li Ronghuan. Li Chenglan, calm down. Calm down? Li Ronghuan, don't pretend here. Tell me, are you in cahoots with this quack doctor? Do you not want to save Dad? You can't wait for Dad to leave as soon as possible. You must have colluded with the quack to kill Dad. Mrs. Li's hair was disheveled, and she was screaming so loudly that the entire intensive care unit was filled with her voice. The doctor who had been slapped wanted to defend himself, but when he thought that the patient's family was out of control, he held himself back. A few nurses felt that it was unfair for their doctor. They wanted to stand up and say a few words, but the doctor on duty, who had a few clear finger marks on his left cheek, pulled them away and sighed. Forget it. All of you can leave. Li Ronghuan didn't indulge Mrs. Li. You angered your father to death and then wronged the doctor. Li Chenglan, you and your mother liked to use this kind of trick decades ago, and it's still the same after decades. It hasn't changed at all. It's still disgusting. He turned around and apologized to the doctor on duty. Doctor, you've been wronged. I apologize to you. It's our fault. It has nothing to do with you. After she calms down, I'll ask her to come over and apologize to you properly. Madame Li, who had been thrown aside, exploded again when she heard that she had to apologize. I apologize. It's these quacks who killed father. I want to sue them. I must sue them. Li Ronghuan's attitude was very good, and it had nothing to do with him. The doctor on duty looked at Madame Li and sighed. You don't have to apologize. I can understand how you feel. This is a hospital. It's better to control it. You all need to calm down. Chapter 5273. The doctor doesn't dare to ask Mrs. Li to apologize. To be slapped. Forget it. Old man Li has passed away. As his son, Mrs. Li is naturally upset. It's understandable that she loses control of her emotions. With Li Ronghuan's help, the doctors and nurses remove all kinds of instruments and tubes from old man Li first, in case Mrs. Li loses control of her emotions and destroys them. Mrs. Li, who is stopped, wants to rush to the doctor several times, but she is stopped by Li Ronghuan. Mrs. Li scratches Li Ronghuan's face and makes him bleed. Mrs. Li had been raised outside until she was in her teens before she entered the Li family. No matter how carefully she was raised later, no matter how noble and elegant she was later, her vulgarity had long been planted in her bones and could not be changed. At this moment, she was so noisy that the doctors and nurses were stunned. They can understand the pain of losing a loved one, but her behavior is so extreme that it is unacceptable. It's all because you quacks didn't save my father. You killed me. Our Li family will not let you go. Li Ronghuan, get out of my way. Don't pretend to be a good person here. Professor Li, find Professor Li for me. Quacks, you quacks. Mrs. Li keeps shouting. The doctors bury their heads to clean up the instruments, and the nurses bury their heads to do the things at hand. They all move quickly and finish cleaning up in a short time. The doctors and nurses bow deeply to old man Li again before leaving the intensive care unit. As for Professor Li, who has been in charge of old man Li, he is performing a major operation at this moment and does not participate in the rescue. Old man Li, who woke up yesterday, is in good spirits. No matter how excellent Professor Li's medical skills are, he can't predict that old man Li has an accident early in the morning. After the medical staff leaves, Li Ronghuan doesn't care about Mrs. Li anymore. She calmly takes out her phone to inform the relevant personnel. When old Madame Xiao Li woke up, she heard her daughter crying. Her head was throbbing with pain. She opened her eyes with some difficulty and murmured Chenglan. She was in a daze and didn't know where she was. Old people become particularly slow in all aspects. When she hears Li Ronghuan say, "Your father-in-law is dead. Take some time to come to the hospital." Mrs. Li suddenly wakes up. Master, what happened to you? Don't scare me. Master, please wake up, wake up, wake up. Compared with Madame Li, old man Li, who had regarded old man Li as the sky all her life, was the one who felt that the sky was really falling down. When the sky fell down, she also became out of her wits. Apart from constantly shouting for Old Man Lee, she did nothing else. "Mom, Dad is gone. Dad just left. Mom, Dad is gone. He was killed by a group of quacks." Mrs. Lee, who was crying miserably, added fuel to the fire and blamed Old Man Lee's death on the doctors. It seemed that this was the only way for her to feel better and accept the death of Old Man Lee. Lee Ronghuan wouldn't let her have her way. After informing the deputy chief of staff Du, he snorts coldly. "You killed the old man's favorite son. The old man couldn't accept it and was angered to death by you. I said before that the matter is a little serious. Let the old man take it slow. You two thought I did it on purpose. You even pretended to be pitiful in front of the old man and coaxed him to force me. Li Chenglan, you are already 60 years old. You are so old that half of your body is already in Huangshe. Why do you still like to shirk responsibility? Why did Li Chuhai die? Why did Yi Qian target Li Chuhai? It's all because you brought Yi Qian to your side. If it weren't for you, with the ability of an orphan, what could Yi Qian find out? She would never find out in her lifetime." Chapter 5274. Mrs. Li wanted to make him feel better, but Li Ronghuan would never agree. He wanted to turn the Li family upside down and uproot the rotten tree that had been rotten for a long time, so that there would be no chance for it to rise again. Back then, how the mistress forced the legal wife and how she entered the Li family step by step. Although he was young, he still remembered it clearly. He had endured for decades, and finally, the Li family was unlucky. How could he let these people who forced his mother to die live well? The old man was dead, and the others should follow him. Mrs. Li was most afraid that Li Ronghuan would mention that she killed her brother Li Chuhai. Thinking about it carefully, it seemed that it was indeed from the time she met Yi Jifan that her brother Li Chuhai got into trouble one after another. The more she thought about it, the more flustered she was. The more flustered she was, the more afraid she was to face it, and there was no way for her to calm down. She thought about it carefully and wondered if there was something wrong. Did Li Ronghuan deliberately say this to set her up? Old Madame Xiao Li was a successful person who had fought all the way to the end. She treated Old Master Li as the sky and coaxed Old Master Li to hand over all the family matters to her. Even the two sons left behind by his first wife were handed over to her to raise. She had the means and strategy to coax Old Master Li to death. Old Man Li might believe that his youngest son was killed by his beloved daughter, but Mrs. Li did not believe it. How could her daughter hurt her son? The two of them had been relying on each other since they were young. They helped each other all the way and defeated the two sons of the first wife. How could such a good sister and brother hurt each other? Even if Li Ronghuan had 10,000 reasons, she would not believe it. Hearing this, Mrs. Li, who had cried until her eyes turned black and had a splitting headache, calmed down. She turned her head and stared at Li Ronghuan with murderous eyes. "Ronghuan, Old Master just left. Are you so eager to kill your sister? Old Master is gone, but there is still me. As long as I am here, you can't be presumptuous. The Li family can't allow you to be presumptuous." Old Man Li was a little scared now. She even regretted letting Li Ronghuan into the family and asking Old Man Li to hand over some connections of the Li family to Li Ronghuan. She was afraid that Li Ronghuan would use the connections in her hands to squeeze her out of the Li family and take away everything that originally belonged to her and Li Jun. Therefore, she had to let Li Ronghuan know that even if Old Man Li was gone, she was still here and would not allow anyone to act presumptuously. No one could take the Li family away from her. Li Ronghuan seemed to have seen through old Madame Xiao Li's thoughts. The corners of her mouth curled up slightly, revealing a strange smile that old Madame Xiao Li couldn't guess at all. Li family? I haven't returned to the Li family for more than 10 years. What do you think I will do to the Li family? All right, you can do whatever you want with the Li family. After the old man's funeral is settled, I will leave the Li family immediately. Now, I'm only responsible for what I should be responsible for as a son. Inform all the members of the Li family and the old man's subordinates. Then, Release the obituary. After the old man is buried, the Li family's old mansion will be your world. Old Madam Xiao Li didn't believe that Li Ronghuan would think of giving up the Li family's business. If he really wanted to give up, he wouldn't have returned to the Li family when Old Master collapsed. His wild ambition was to return for the Li family. Li Ronghuan, do you dare to swear to Old Master that you don't want the Li family at all? Do you dare? Do you dare to swear on your knees? Repeat what you said just now about kneeling in front of Old Master. Old Madam Xiao Li pressed on, forcing Li Ronghuan to swear. She wanted to know if Li Ronghuan wanted to fight for the Li family. Chapter 5275. It was not difficult to kneel down and swear to the old man. The old man was his biological father. No matter how he did not fulfill his duty as a father, everyone knew that Li Ronghuan was the old man's son. Now that the old man was dead, of course he had to kneel down. It was not difficult to kneel down and swear. He did not want the Li family at all. Li Shuang knelt down and kowtowed 3 times. Li Shuang was so obedient that Mrs. Li could not believe it. Mrs. Li did not expect that Li Ronghuan would really kneel down and swear. She wanted to see some clues from Li Ronghuan's face, but she could not see what Li Ronghuan was thinking. She would not believe it even if he knelt down and swore. Mrs. Li, who had wanted to get the Li family all her life, would not believe it. Li Ronghuan did not care whether she believed it or not. After swearing, he kowtowed 3 more times, got up, and turned around. He had no intention of staying. When he walked to the door of the intensive care unit, he thought of something and turned around again. The mother and daughter who were guarding Old Man Li suddenly tensed up and stared at Li Ronghuan as if they were guarding against a wolf. You can inform Li Jun yourself. I don't need to worry about that, in case someone thinks that I want to hurt Li Jun again. After saying the last sentence, Li Ronghuan left completely. Walking out of the hospital, Li Ronghuan went straight back to the hotel and opened a bottle of red wine to celebrate. After drinking a glass of red wine, he remembered that he had forgotten to inform the most important person. How could he forget his nephew, Li Jinyan? He took out his phone and immediately sent a text message to Li Jinyan, telling him that the Li family had been damaged. The old man had passed away, and he wanted to see if he could ask for leave to come back for the funeral. They could also have a drink or something. The text message was very happy, without any sadness. On the other side, the deputy chief of staff Du, who had received the news of his father-in-law's death, hurried to the hospital from the general staff department. Du Jiai, who had been locked up for 2 days, also received the news. She staggered out of the house and cried all the way to the hospital. Madame Li's 2 sons and 2 daughters had all received the news. Her eldest son and eldest daughter were not in the capital, so it would take some time for them to come back. The entire Du family rushed to the hospital. Old Man Li's faction received the news. They were so shocked that they gasped. Their biggest backer had fallen. Didn't they say that he was saved? Why did he leave just like that? They hurried to the hospital to make arrangements for Old Man Li's funeral. Commander-in-Chief Xia was surprised to learn that Old Man Li had passed away at around 10 o'clock in the morning. Didn't you say that he was getting better? How could he leave just like that? Did you find out anything? They said that Li Ronghuan said something that made Old Man Li so angry. The doctor was tight-lipped and the nurse was wronged. She only revealed a little bit, saying that Mrs. Li killed Li Chuhai. The Li family had been under surveillance for a long time. After Old Man Li's stroke, they relaxed a little. Commander-in-Chief Xia also knew about Li Ronghuan's return to the country. Li Ronghuan told Li Jinyan the purpose of his return. Li Jinyan immediately told Xia Jinyuan, and Xia Jinyuan immediately told Commander-in-Chief Xia. He knew Li Ronghuan's purpose of returning to the country was to destroy the Li family. After several attempts, Commander-in-Chief Xia finally believed that Li Ronghuan had returned to the country to destroy the Li family. Therefore, he stopped keeping a close eye on Li Ronghuan. Li Ronghuan had investigated Yi Qian, but Commander-in-Chief Xia was not sure either. Commander-in-Chief Xia's face turned cold when he heard the name Li Chuhai. Find out what exactly happened at that time. The sooner the better. Madame Li killed Li Chuhai? Why did Li Ronghuan suddenly mention this? Chapter 5276. Commander-in-Chief Xia wasn't worried about Li Ronghuan suddenly mentioning that Mrs. Li was the one who killed Li Chuhai. He was worried that Yi Qian would be implicated. If it weren't for Yi Qian, they wouldn't have bothered to investigate the matter that happened more than 20 years ago. Yi Qian played a key role in bringing Li Chuhai to justice. The Li family had been secretly investigating who killed Li Chuhai and even sent people to Yi Qian's hometown to investigate. Fortunately, they were prepared in advance and erased all information about the Red Plum martyr, so the people sent by Old Man Li didn't find anything. It had been almost 3 years since the incident. It had been more than a year since Yi Qian graduated from the military academy. Li Ronghuan, who returned to China with a purpose, suddenly brought up the matter again. In the end, Old Man Li was angered to death. Commander-in-Chief Xia had to be on guard. The doctors and nurses couldn't get anything out of them because they weren't at the scene. The only people who might be able to get something out of them were the servants who took care of Old Man Li at the door of the intensive care unit. They wanted to see if they could get anything out of them. Commander-in-Chief Xia was still investigating the truth. Li Jinyan, who was resting at noon, returned to the dormitory and took off his training uniform. He took a shower in the shower and dried his hair with an army green towel. Then, he walked to the closet and took out a clean short-sleeved shirt to put on. His cold eyes inadvertently glanced at the phone that he hadn't turned on for several days. His thin lips pursed slightly, and he picked up the phone and turned it on. When he saw the first message, Li Jinyan's hand that was holding the phone stiffened for a few seconds. His fingertips paused for a few seconds. Before he could decide whether to open the phone to see the content, the second and third messages followed. This was a private phone number. Other than the closest people around him, no one else would disturb him. Therefore, even if the phone hadn't been turned on for several days, he would only receive a few messages. When the second and third messages appeared, Li Jinyan, who had always had a good memory, immediately recognized the owner of the number. His finger pressed the button on his phone, and 2 messages with a lot of information entered his eyes. They came so suddenly that his pupils suddenly shrank. The head of the Li family, his grandfather, Old Man Li, passed away this morning. He didn't die of illness, but of anger. The message came too suddenly. Li Jinyan had already forgotten about the first message. After reading the 2 messages, Li Jinyan, who was only wearing a fitness short-sleeve shirt, broke out in a cold sweat. He said that he found out why Li Chuhai was able to reopen a case from 20 years ago and was finally shot dead. He also said that he deliberately provoked the old man and made him think that Li Chuhai was killed by Madame Li. The reason was, Madame Li was the only good person in the Li family who had come in contact with Li Chuhai and brought him to justice. Old Man Li, who had been unable to accept the fact that his youngest son had been shot dead at sea, was already weak and could not take any more shocks. However, the results of Li Ronghuan's investigation were too shocking. He could not catch his breath and passed away. Li Jinyan could accept everything else, including Old Man Li's death. The only thing he could not accept was that Li Ronghuan found out that Madame Li was the only good person in the Li family who had come in contact with Li Chuhai and brought him to justice. This good person was none other than his only sister, Yi Qian. Li Jinyan, who had never taken the initiative to contact the phone number, immediately contacted Li Ronghuan. He needed to confirm whether Li Ronghuan had found out about his sister, Yi Qian. Did he say his sister's name in front of the Li family? Chapter 5277. The long beeping sound meant that no one picked up. Even when it automatically ended, no one picked up. Li Jinyan, whose eyes were covered with a layer of coldness, called back again, but no one picked up after 3 tries. Li Jinyan made a prompt decision and dialed Commander-in-Chief Xia's personal cell phone. Li Ronghuan could not be contacted for the time being, but he could tell Commander-in-Chief Xia his guess. Commander-in-Chief Xia's personal cell phone had Li Jinyan's number saved in it. He was waiting for the results of the investigation. When he saw who was calling, he waved his hand to stop the report and immediately picked up the phone to answer. With Li Jinyan's guess, he could basically confirm that Li Ronghuan had indeed investigated Yi Qian. Commander-in-Chief Xia, who was standing by the window, said in a deep voice, "Don't worry, I'll take care of this. Old Man Li has passed away, so the biggest threat to Xiao Yi has been removed. Deputy Chief of Staff Du is watching Madame Li closely, so she won't act rashly. If she dares to touch Yi Qian, the military will not be the first to kill her, but her husband. Although old Du has some differences with me, he is also a person with strong principles and does not deviate from his path." Madame Li clamored for him to help Li Chuhai. When old Du found out that Li Chuhai had done those terrible things, he almost said that he wanted to kill Li Chuhai himself. "I will look for old Du and keep an eye on Madame Li for his own sake. You don't have to worry too much about Old Man Li. Old Man Li has never liked Madame Li interfering in his official business. His subordinates also do not have any private contact with Madame Li. She wants to use the connections left by Old Man Li to deal with Xiao Yi, but she doesn't have the power to do so. These people all relied on Old Man Li, this big tree, for shade. Now that the big tree has fallen, their direct line of descent has been repeatedly damaged. They can't even take care of themselves, let alone listen to old Madame Li's arrangement to deal with Yi Qian. The only unsettling factor is Li Chuhai's son and daughter. Li Jun, who came back in the wee hours of the day before yesterday, is missing. We found out that he returned to the Li family's old house after leaving the hospital. Now, we are still checking the whole city to see if he has left, including the airport and the train station. Old Man Li had passed away, while Li Chuhai's son, Li Jun, had gone missing. Even Madame Li had not been able to contact Li Jun. Commander-in-Chief Xia had seen him take care of Li Jun before. He was a handsome young man with a pair of gloomy eyes. As for Li Chuhai's daughter, he still couldn't find out where she was or what she looked like. Li Chuhai had a strong sense of counter-investigation. He had secretly protected his children since they were born and had adopted a son and a daughter to confuse others. He had even hidden this from Old Man Li and Old Madame Li. His thoughts were so deep that it made people tremble with fear. Then, were his children good or bad? From Li Jun's personal photos, it could be seen that they were not good people. The military had investigated Li Jun, but because he had been living abroad and was well protected by Li Chuhai, they couldn't find anything. Now that he had disappeared from the capital, Commander-in-Chief Xia had listed him as a key target for investigation. It was fine if he was still in the country, but if he was not, it would be difficult. Li Jinyan, whose eyes were slightly lowered, was silent for a while. Then he said coldly, "There is no difference whether he is in the country or abroad. The difference is where he is." Commander-in-Chief Xia immediately understood what he meant. At the moment, we still can't confirm whether he will cause any real harm to Xiao Yi, so we can't take any coercive measures against him. You don't have to panic. Remember, I am in the capital and you have family Xia. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.